Chapter 251. Looking at all the era names in Deqi, Yuan Feng was enough to compete for the title of the longest era name. In the long history of Deqi, there were only two era names that had been used for more than 54 years. As a vassal state, the Yang Kingdom naturally followed the Qi calendar. Jiang Wang recovered from his cultivation and suppressed the faintly discernible heaven and earth gate. If he wanted to break the heaven and earth gate, he could start trying now. In the Tongtian Palace, the 9 Milky Way whirlpools rotated silently. The star-twining spirit snake was vigorous and agile, shuttling back and forth between several Milky Way whirlpools. The netherworld candle was no longer enough for it to hover. The warning on the eve of Maplewood City's destruction made Jiang Wang feel that the netherworld candle seemed to have its own intelligence. But in the time after that, it didn't show any similar signs. Moreover, the netherworld candle was already very short and small. If he could find a way to light it, Jiang Wang estimated that it wouldn't last more than 15 minutes. The sudden palpitations made Jiang Wang stop his cultivation, so he pushed the door open and went out. He was still living in a mine, and staying with the honest and hardworking miners made him feel at ease. What happened? Du Guizhao's panicked expression cast a shadow over Jiang Wang's mood. After experiencing Gu Heng's death, the dismembered corpse of the pig-faced man, and Hu Xiaoming's broken fingers were fed to the dogs. In Jiang Wang's opinion, there shouldn't be many things that could make her panic. A lot of people died in Qingyang town. Xiao Xiao's words made Jiang Wang's heart skip a beat. He grabbed Xiao Xiao and rushed directly to Qingyang town with her. What happened exactly? His vigorous reserves of Dao energy were enough for him to protect Xiao Xiao during the journey. The familiar scenery kept retreating in her vision, and Xiao Xiao felt that her heart was about to jump out of her throat. I'm sick. What Jiang Wang didn't know was that Du Guizhao's panic wasn't because a lot of people died in Qingyang town, but because she was worried that this would cause Jiang Wang's dissatisfaction and anger. He wasn't in the mood to care about the little handmaiden's feelings. He really couldn't understand. No matter what kind of disease it was, even if it was a plague, Qingyang town was already prepared to deal with it. How could so many people die? Jiang Wang rushed to Qingyang town with his extraordinary cultivation. Hearing the noise, Zhu Biqiong, Xiang Qian, and Zhang Hai all chased after him. The Human was not far from Qingyang town, but when Jiang Wang sped to Qingyang town, many people who saw his figure remembered that the last time he sped here was when he killed Hu Xiaoming. In the Yang country, the yamen where the constable sat was called the town hall. At this time, the haggard Hu Laojin was in the town hall. He did not have the ability to turn the situation around, and even lost the courage to face it. Back then, he had helped him to this position only because he was obedient and familiar with the local area. When Jiang Wang landed in front of the hall, his legs suddenly went soft. He didn't know why, but in his heart, he breathed a sigh of relief. Tell me what happened briefly, Jiang Wang said directly. My lord, it's this, Hu Laojin struggled to speak for a long time, but he still couldn't say anything. Jiang Wang didn't hide his dissatisfaction. Behind him, Du Guizhao said, Master, I summarized it before but didn't have time to tell you. In the entire Qingyang town, the situation of the disease is the same as the 2 cases that died early. By the time I learned the news and reported it to you, there have been 27 deaths today. In these days, there have been a total of 53 deaths. As for those who are sick or are suspected to be sick, there is no way to get an accurate number for the time being. Obviously, Hu Laojin was in charge of Qingyang town, but Du Guizhao knew the data by heart. Why did I only find out now? I also only found out today. Probably because the outbreak today is so serious that it can't be hidden anymore. It can't be hidden anymore. Jiang Wang chewed on these words and looked at Hu Laojin with a cold gaze. You hit it? Before, I didn't know it was so serious. In his panic, Hu Laojin spoke more and more incoherently. Those who died in the village earlier, I didn't report it. I only found out yesterday and thought I could control it. I've already ordered to control the situation according to the level of resistance against the plague. The whole town is under martial law. How did things still get to this point? Jiang Wang looked straight into Hu Laogan's eyes, his hand already on his sword. One wrong word, and he was going to kill. That little bit of friendship in the past wasn't enough for Hu Laojin to be forgiven. When Jiang Wang was still hiding his identity, he was the first to express goodwill to Jiang Wang. The reason was that Jiang Wang, as a transcendent being, still treated him as a person. What Jiang Wang couldn't accept the most was that he had trusted Hu Laojin for this reason. After Hu Laojin became the village constable, he didn't treat the other townspeople as people and disregarded their lives. According to the census statistics, there were 36,671 people in the entire Qingyang town area. Half of them were in Qingyang town, and the remaining half were scattered in more than 30 villages. A total of 53 deaths was only a small number on paper. In reality, among the living people, it was already extremely terrifying compared to the number of people in Qingyang town. Once it was announced, it was enough to cause widespread panic. Hu Laojin mumbled and couldn't say anything. On the other hand, De Gushao explained on the side, there are a lot of townspeople who can't stay at home. There are too many of them who are busy making a living and partying. They're all old folks, and they didn't break the law or commit any crimes. The town's constables can't really do anything to them. In this subordinate's opinion, the main reason is the announcement from Jia City. Jia City's announcement? An announcement to pacify the people. Every town has one, and they all want to put it up. Hu Laojin finally reacted. He took a notice from the table and handed it to Jiang Wang with both hands. Because of this, the townspeople don't believe it and don't want to stay. It's useless to persuade them. What Hu Laojin didn't say was that even he himself felt that Jiang Wang was making a big fuss over nothing. He also felt that nothing major would happen. Of course, Jiang Wang could not see this point. But at this moment, his mind was completely attracted by the thin piece of paper in his hand. The paper wasn't thick, but because of the seal of Jia City's City Lord Manor, it had weight. On top of that, the Shi family had built up their reputation by managing Jia City for hundreds of years. It was the trust of Jia City's hundreds of thousands of townspeople towards Jia City's City Lord Manor. It was only a piece of paper, but it was heavier than anything else. On the paper was written, "There is a disease that disturbs the townspeople. Rumors are flying everywhere. This manor clarifies the private rumors in the name of Dongwang Valley's transcendent cultivator, Shi Zichu. Up until now, there is no sign of this disease being contagious. Dongwang Valley's current medical master, Shi Zichu, cultivator Tenglong. Due to this small disease, with a flip of the palm, the ear, the townspeople should be stopped, and there is no need to be disturbed by this disease. May the townspeople be safe." After reading this announcement to pacify the people, a chill ran down his spine, straight to the top of his head. Then, it was an uncontrollable anger. It said it wasn't contagious, but 57 people in Qingyang town had died from the same disease. It said it was a flip of the palm, but 57 people in Qingyang town had already died. In the entire Jia City's townspeople, how many people were sick and how many were dead? What kind of bullshit announcement was this? It was clearly a death announcement. Chapter 252. Li Jin was over 50 this year, already at the age of knowing his destiny. Today, he wanted to go out for a walk as usual, but the town's constable stopped him at the street entrance. "What do you mean?" Old Li glared at him. The surname Li was the second most populous surname in Qingyang town, second only to the surname Hu. Therefore, as a very senior elder in the Li family, he was also highly respected in Qingyang town. He knew this constable. It was the kid from the Wang family. He was just wearing a dog's skin, yet he dared to block his way. He was going against the heavens. Old Li. Constable Wang tried to appease him. The town hall has issued an order. During this period of time, no one is allowed to walk the streets. They can only stay at home. Why is there a ban? Didn't 2 people die of illness 2 days ago? The town hall feels that it's very dangerous, so he wants everyone to lie low for a while. After the limelight passes, it's good to come out for a walk. Old who doesn't know shit. I don't know that old fool. Old Li glared at Constable Wang. You think I can't read? Have you seen the letter from the city? There's nothing wrong with this illness. Get out of my way. Constable Wong looked troubled. Sir, it's always good to be safe. It's better to be safe than sorry. As the saying goes, one knows his destiny at 50. Do you understand what destiny means? I'm already this old. What am I afraid of? Oldly glared. I won't blame you if I die of illness, okay? With a wave of his hand, he pushed aside the fence at the end of the street. As he walked out, he muttered, in a peaceful world, you're not allowed to go out. It's so strange. Did I break the law? You're treating me like a criminal? Constable Wong looked at his colleague helplessly and could only pretend that he didn't hear. This wasn't the only case. With a letter from Jia City, the people were not afraid at all. Even if there were a few who advised people to be careful, it was mostly seen as a rumor. Even if there was a place like Qingyang Town that paid attention early on, it was still difficult to enforce the regulations. At least in name, Qingyang Town was still under the jurisdiction of Jia City. The so-called prohibition order actually existed in name only. In the town hall, Jiang Wang directly crumpled the notice into a ball and threw it on the ground. Boom! With the powerful Tao energy mixed in, this ball of paper smashed a hole in the ground. Hu Laojin was shocked and sat down on the chair. Jiang Wang looked at him coldly. I gave you the power, and I took the loss. You don't have to do anything. You just have to carry out my orders. But you can't even do that. You're responsible for the deaths of everyone in this town. Hu Laojin, you have committed grave sins, and even 100 deaths will not be enough to atone for your sins. Hu Laogin's face was ashen. I am also responsible for giving the position to a piece of trash like you. Jiang Wang swung his arm and walked out of the town hall. As he walked, he issued orders, Xiao Xiao, stay in the town hall and temporarily take over all the duties of the village constable. With Zhang Hai in charge, all village chiefs, constables, and those who refused to obey could be killed. All bailiffs and warriors were to take action. From today onwards, no one was allowed to wander through the streets and alleys. Everyone was to guard themselves behind closed doors. With the town hall as the center, move forward, Zhu Biqiong, and patrol the east and west respectively. The tens of thousands of miles of trekking from the Zhuang state to the Qi state had sharpened his worldview. In the face of such a crisis, he became even more decisive. I will personally go to the villages below. First, I will carry out the prohibition order. Then, I will check the illnesses of the villagers one by one. This time, there's a large outbreak. I suspect that it is a plague. What if the people refuse to be quarantined? Zhu Biqiong asked. Will I kill him too? Jiang Wang stopped and looked at him. We are quarantining the people to save them. If you kill them, what is the point of what we are doing? If they refuse, we will try to persuade them. If persuasion fails, we can enforce it. We can find them with food, and punish them according to the circumstances. Understood. Jiang Wang went to each village alone with his sword to investigate. The others also got busy. Hu Laojin, who had been stripped of his power, was dispirited in his seat. His face was ashen. Du Guxiao began to arrange matters. Only then did Hu Laojin seem to come to his senses. He stood up and staggered out. He was like a walking corpse. Du Guxiao only glanced at him indifferently. Then, she continued to do her own things. She helped Hu Laojin to explain before only to show her value to Jiang Wang. She didn't have a good impression of Hu Laojin. It was Hu Laojin who hired her in a mine. Later, she was abused by Ge Heng. Although Hu Laojin himself might not know about Ge Heng's cruelty, the fact that he caused could not be erased. The reason why he didn't take revenge was because Jiang Wang didn't allow it. Fortunately, after this incident, the little friendship between him and Jiang Wang had been exhausted. This was the price he had to pay for his incompetence and self-righteousness. After spending so much time with Jiang Wang, Du Guxiao had long understood that Jiang Wang was not a person who would vent his anger or shirk responsibility. As long as his request was carried out, if the mistake was his decision, he would never let others bear the responsibility. In this incident, as the village head, Hu Laogin's poor performance, Jiang Wang had already restrained himself by not killing him on the spot. Hu Laojin shuffled out of the town hall. It was already June, and the sun was no longer gentle. Especially at noon, when it shone on the body, it was like being pricked by needles. Hu Laojin squinted his eyes, but he couldn't stop the murky tears from falling. He was actually a simple person. He didn't feel sad about losing his temporary power. When he was the manager of Hu's mine, he didn't fill his own pockets. When he was the village head of Qingyang town, he didn't seek wealth for himself. He didn't have any children, only a fierce old wife. The couple didn't have much material desire. So even though he was the village head, he still lived in the house he used to live in. What really made him sad was that just now, he realized that he had become a murderer. If he had strictly followed Jiang Wang's previous orders and isolated the town from the outside world, perhaps many of the townspeople wouldn't have died today. Just like what Jiang Wang had said, every single person who died of illness in the town was Hu Laogan's responsibility. How could his old and decrepit shoulders bear all of this? Jiang Wang was swift and decisive. He went to the village himself as soon as he gave the order. Those places were even more unregulated. He could only deal with it personally with his extraordinary cultivation. But in Qingyang town, it wasn't so easy to do things. The people of Qingyang town didn't pay enough attention to it before. Under Dugu Zhao's command, new notices were posted, the severity of the illness was announced, and the crowds gathered everywhere were dispersed. All of these took time. And the manpower of the Qingyang town hall was pitifully small. Hu Laojin walked out in a daze. Every crowd he saw on the way made his heart cold. If it was a plague, if it was a human plague, he didn't dare to imagine the consequences. My dear fellow countrymen, let me tell you. Hu Laojin walked to the edge of the crowd and suddenly shouted, Qingyang town is seriously ill. Dozens of people have died. It's very likely to be a human plague. Quickly go back to your houses. Don't gather together. Don't go out. He shouted every time he walked to a place. Many people knew him. He was born in Qingyang town, grew up, got married, and grew old. Many people here trusted him. Seeing this sad little old man, some people felt strange, some people felt puzzled, but more people chose to believe. Finally, in the largest market in Qingyang town, the market on the west side of the town, people saw their current village chief, Hu Laojin, trembling as he climbed up to the roof with a ladder. He was old. Standing on the roof, he wasn't tall. Instead, he was stooped. He loudly repeated the words that he had repeated along the way. However, his voice was already hoarse, so people couldn't hear him clearly. Only in the end, he shouted, So many people have died. It's all my fault. This old man apologizes to you. He fell from the roof to the ground. Bang! Like a watermelon exploding. It stopped in many people's memories. P.S. In the past 2 days, I've received the reader's concern and love for this novel. Jihu Private Message, Reader Group, Weibo Private Message, Weibo Group, in the book review section. I've seen every concern. I've worked so hard to write this book until now. I've endured so much ridicule and endured so many torturous nights. If it suddenly disappeared, the blow to me could be devastating. Then why did I write all this? I've explained it once in the reader group. Now that many people have questions, and they're all people who truly love this book, I have to explain it again. The plot of The Plague was set a long time ago. But if I didn't have my current experience, it would be difficult to write it so vividly. And I wouldn't have the boiling emotions in my heart now. I do want to record something. Literature carries the Tao, and words express emotions. My emotions and Tao both urge me to do this. People who write don't use words to make sounds. What else can they do to this world? I hope that in a few years or more, if someone picks up this novel and reads this, they'll remember that we've experienced such things before. We've encountered such disgusting and dark times, and there were also people who pointed out the light. I only hope that everyone will keep it in their hearts and try not to discuss the world outside the book. After all, behind prosperity, democracy, and civilization is harmony. That's my explanation. A reader's comment touched me. He said, Isn't it good to discuss the Tao while sitting down? But that's my Tao. I've discussed it openly and secretly on Weibo, Jihu, and Weibo's official account. I really don't know what else I can do other than speak up. I've donated some money, but it's just a drop in the bucket. The feedback I received made me realize that this novel was now carrying some people's expectations. I do need to be more careful to protect our common world. I've already deleted the most obvious sentence in the previous chapter. I'll be more careful in the future. Thank you again for your love and love. How so? At 9 in the morning. Chapter 253. Li Jin watched Hu Laojian commit suicide with his own eyes. The market west of the town had always been the most lively. Of course, he wouldn't miss it. The older he got, the more he liked to watch the bustle, because the days were peaceful and uneventful. He had always looked down on the old bumpkin, Hu Laojian. Even after Hu Laojian became the town constable, he still looked down on him. He, Li Jin, had been properly educated. He knew what kind of place East King Valley was and where the Soaring Dragon Realm was. He knew the significance of the seal of Jia City's City Lord Mansion. Weren't these things more trustworthy than Hu Laojian's shallow knowledge? But Hu Laojian jumped down in front of him. So resolute, so straightforward, so desperate. Although he always talked about how he already knew his destiny, he always said that he knew everything and wasn't afraid of anything. But having lived to this age, he understood that nothing was more important than life. He didn't want to die. He believed that Hu Laojian didn't want to either. But why did this old bumpkin fall to his death so tragically in front of so many people? People gathered in front of Hu Laojian's corpse. Some were shocked, some were afraid, some were curious, and some were confused. The noise was endless. Go back, Old Man Li suddenly roared. He picked up a broom in front of the wine shop and began to chase people away. Go back. Don't you know that there's an epidemic? Do you all want to die by gathering here? If you want to die, die at home. Don't have King come out and hurt people. Jiang Wang was almost certain that it was an epidemic that caused the deaths of so many townspeople. Shizichu said that the worst result was nothing more than an epidemic. If the deaths of so many people weren't the worst result, then what was? There weren't many good methods at the present stage. The conditions in Qingyang town were also very limited. The plan he formulated was simple and crude. It was to directly separate all the townspeople and cut off the infection route. Then, with him as the representative of the extraordinary power, he would go door to door and carry out an investigation. He would find all the people who were infected and treat them together. He would isolate and diagnose all the people who might be infected. This was a very difficult task. In the entire Qingyang town, there were 36,671 recorded people. And the extraordinary power in Qingyang town was only Jiang Wang, Zhu Biqiang, Xiang Qian, and Zhang Hai. On average, each cultivator was responsible for investigating more than 9,000 people. Even with the help of the town constables, the workload was terrifying. However, this kind of thing couldn't be delayed. All of Jia City's transcendent powers were concentrated in Jia City. The supernatural powers of Qingyang town originally belonged to Hu Yu, who was the town constable, and his son, Hu Xiaoming. Of course, there was a simpler way. If it was only to stop the spread of the plague, they could send people to guard the four sides of Qingyang town. For transcendent cultivators would guard each side and not allow anyone to enter or leave. Once everyone was dead, the plague would naturally disappear as well. So much so that Jiang Wang could completely wash his hands of it. He was not from Qingyang town, and it was already difficult for him to gain more benefits in Qingyang town. Letting Jia Cheng and Yang country worry about this seemed to be the smartest thing to do. However, the reason why the world turned bad was not because people were stupid. On the contrary, it was because there were too many smart people. Like Lugan, like Ximyunan. With a map of Qingyang town in one hand, Jiang Wang rushed to Liujia village, which was closest to the town, as fast as he could. When he reached the outskirts of the village, he saw the curious and scrutinizing gazes of the villagers. Without saying a word, he drew his sword. The Milky Way spun, and his Tao energy violently attacked. The sword aura soared, and the sound of the sword rang in everyone's ears. With one slash, a huge crack appeared at the entrance of the village. It was as wide as a fist and more than 2 feet deep. When had the villagers of Liujia village ever seen such a powerhouse? All of them trembled in fear and trepidation. Only then did Jiang Wang mobilize his Tao energy and spread his voice throughout the village. I am Jiang Wang, representing Qingyang Town Hall. Right now, I suspect that someone in this village has contracted the plague. For everyone's safety, everyone should come out of their houses and stand at the door to wait for my inspection. Those who conceal, hide, or refuse to cooperate will be severely punished once discovered. I will only say this once. No one dared to object. The boorish men who rushed out of their houses with hoes were also stopped by the villagers. How could they object to a transcendent cultivator who could create a crack in the ground with one slash? Not to mention that it was just an inspection. Even if it was a robbery, they could only accept it. To put it bluntly, even if all the old and young men in the village were chopped into pieces, they might not be able to fill up the crack. For Jiang Wang, this was also a last resort. In the face of the plague, he did not have time to persuade them one by one. Even if he was willing to put in a good word for them one by one, these people might not listen. Using force to intimidate them was the fastest way to achieve his goal. After making sure that all the people of Liujia village understood his intentions, he walked into the village and observed the villagers one by one. There was no need to touch them. Although the poison-swallowing stinger strengthened by the Dao development platform could not completely absorb the plague virus, it could still detect hidden situations. As he walked from house to house, those who were hiding under their beds were also pulled out by him and given a slap on the face in front of everyone. Regardless of gender, old or young, he treated everyone equally. Fortunately, no one in Liujia village had contracted the plague. Jiang Wang dispersed the poison-swallowing stinger and returned to the entrance of the village. He pointed at the crack made by the long sword and shouted to the villagers, "All villagers are not allowed to visit or leave the village for 10 days. Violators will be punished by this crack. You do not need to be afraid. I am here for the plague. In the future, there will be people from the government coming here regularly. If you need food and clothing, you can all apply." Jiang Wang repeated the symptoms of the people who had contracted the disease. If you discover this disease, you can report it to the government. Once it is verified, you will be rewarded with 10 knife coins. If you discover that you have contracted the disease, you must report it promptly. The government will treat you together. Do not implicate others. If you deliberately conceal it and do not report it, you will be charged with murder and must be killed. After saying this, Jiang Wang turned and left. He rushed to the next village without hesitation. Time was already very tight. If he was a moment earlier, he did not know how many more people he could save. He did the same in every village in Qingyang town. If he discovered that someone had contracted the plague, he would pick them out and take them away. He would warn others not to approach the family and mark the village as a village to be observed carefully on the map. For the time being, Jiang Wang placed all the infected people in a mountain forest and strictly ordered them not to move. He planned to bring them back to Qingyang town after checking all the villages and specifically asked for treatment. However, despite his repeated orders, it was inevitable that the infected people would be in a panic. When he returned to the gathering point of the infected people from the 5th village with 3 infected people, he found that 2 of the infected people had escaped while he was away. The remaining people's eyes were also flickering. People's hearts wavered. Jiang Wang did not say anything. He immediately used the Taoist technique to recall and set off to chase after them. How could 2 mere mortals escape from his pursuit? Crossing the mountain forest, he startled the birds. Soon, he caught the 2 fleeing infected people and brought them back to the gathering point, 1 in each hand. In front of all the infected people, Jiang Wang directly pulled out his long sword. The sword shone with a cold light. The 2 young infected people knelt on the ground and kowtowed desperately, crying bitterly. They were afraid that they would be abandoned. They thought that they would be gathered together and killed. That was why they ran away. To be honest, this kind of mentality was very normal, and it was understandable. Understand your fear, but at this critical moment, since I have given the order, you must obey it. Because you're not wasting my time, but my time to save more people. It was understandable, but the law could not tolerate it. If Jiang Wang did not uphold his orders, no one would listen to his orders anymore. Harsh laws were used in troubled times. This was not a troubled time, but it was also a troubled time. There was not much difference. Jiang Wang crossed his sword and cut off 2 toes. In the end, he did not kill them. He only chose to cut off the toes as a warning. It showed his determination and would not affect their future lives too much. If there's a next time, I will definitely kill. Don't challenge my mercy. I am not making a choice between feelings and reason. I am making a choice between your lives and the lives of more people. Believe me, this choice is not difficult for me. Jiang Wang warned these people again. He did not have time to calm their emotions. He immediately turned and left, throwing himself into the inspection work of the next village. Time was too tight. It was impossible for him to take care of everything. Whether these people were afraid or hated, let them be. Anyway, after showing the recollection in public, they all knew that it was impossible to escape. These emotions were only meaningful when people were still alive. 10 days. For 10 whole days, day and night, without sleep or rest, they went to various places in Qingyang town. Not only Jiang Wang, but also Zhu Biqiong, Xiang Qian, and Zhang Hai. Only then did they finally complete Jiang Wang's established plan. They found a total of 130 people in the entire Qingyang town who were infected with the plague and gathered them in the western part of the town. All the houses and shops here were emptied, leaving an isolated space to accommodate the infected. Even though they had all entered the transcendent realm, they still felt physically and mentally exhausted. In these 10 days, Duga Xiao showed extraordinary endurance and energy. With the body of an ordinary person, she completed all the tasks Jiang Wang asked her to do. Whether it was emptying the houses, cleaning the environment, or organizing the patrols, she did it all very well. After that, things were much simpler. She only needed to regularly inspect the place, bring the newly infected to a fixed area, and keep the place clean and tidy. At the same time, she sent living materials to each place to ensure the normal life of the people during the plague. Jiang Wang had already asked Cheng Gung Sheng for help through the Great Illusionary Land. He asked to mobilize cultivators who were proficient in medical skills to treat the patients. Calculating the time, they would arrive in 2 days. Once a medical cultivator with the transcendent realm arrived, perhaps these 130 infected people would not have to die. After completely completing the matter of Qingyang town and containing the plague here to a certain extent, Jiang Wang took his sword and walked out of the town hall. At this time, the sun was just right outside. He stepped into the light. Behind him, Xiao Xiao was sleeping on the table. Zhu Biqiong and Zhang Hai were both leaning on the ground casually, sleeping soundly. Zhang Hai even snored with a smile on his face. It was unknown if he had refined his peerless elixir in his dream. Only Xiang Qian was barely awake. Seeing Jiang Wang's murderous back, he went far away. Chapter 254. Jiang Wang wasn't a bloodthirsty person. Although he didn't avoid killing, if it wasn't necessary, he wouldn't choose to kill. Growing up in a medicine shop, he'd seen too many deaths and sickbeds. But this didn't make him look down on death. It was precisely because he'd seen so many struggles on the line between life and death that he understood the value of life. But right now, his heart was filled with killing intent. In this world, there wasn't anyone who didn't have a reason for existing. No one's growth could be isolated. All transcendent cultivators were built up through the accumulation of resources. In the end, the reason why transcendent cultivators could exist was because of the support of countless ordinary people. Transcendent cultivators enjoyed transcendent resources, but they also had to bear transcendent responsibilities. This was Jiang Wang's understanding of transcendent. It was also something that the instructors in the Tao Academy repeated over and over again. Although in his eyes, Dong didn't do it. The city lord was the master of a region, easily managing hundreds of thousands of people. He controlled their food, clothing, housing, and transportation, and even their life and death. This wasn't an honor, it was a heavy responsibility. Taking care of the people under his rule, letting them live a stable and prosperous life. This was an honor. City Lord Sun Hung fought to the death on Shubi Peak for 3 Mountain City. He peeled off his own skin and put it on his youngest son, allowing him to continue his unfinished business. City Lord Do Yuanmei, for 3 Mountain City, cut off her own path of cultivation with her magical ability. Even the cold-blooded Wei Kyuji, who was criticized by others, fought to the death for Maplewood City. And the Shi family had ruled Jia City for so many years. What did they do when Jia City was in danger? When Jiang Wang arrived at Jia City's city tower, what he saw was a deserted Jia City, a Jia City in decline. Qingyang Town's situation was already so critical. As the source of the disaster, Jia City's situation was naturally even more dangerous. Even with East King Valley's Shi Zichu doing his best to save people, the lack of decisive administrative measures made the speed of treatment far behind the spread of the plague. Jia City's transcendent power far exceeded Qingyang Town's, but the difference in population was much greater than the difference in transcendent power. Finally, it couldn't be hidden anymore. The people weren't idiots. If a person died of illness, his family, friends, neighbors, and the nearby streets would all know. Even the most naive and optimistic people who believed in the city lore manner couldn't help but feel panic when they saw more and more people die. At this time, people thought of the first few people who had spread rumors to mislead the public. They thought of those rumors and rumors. Jia City's plague's outbreak. Jia City's citizens are in danger. We must take immediate action. Please don't go to crowded places. It's best to stay at home. The transcendent, the rumors. TSS transcendent. But those youngest doctors, TT2s, decapitated heads had once carried the wrath and disdain of the public. Their Jia City will be closed for the next few days. From afar, a city guard shouted. They didn't even see Jiang Wang's attack before their weapons were all broken. Jiang Wang walked past the city gate, past the soldiers who were looking at each other, and continued forward. At this critical moment, all the transcendent powers in Jia City were gathered together. This was Jia City's weakest moment, but it was also the time when Jia City could react the fastest. The street was very long. Jiang Wang had only walked halfway when a person appeared at the end of the long street, blocking his path. He wore a scholar's robe, had 3 strands of beard, and had an elegant temperament. Shizichu was busy concocting medicine and hadn't slept for a long time. Shi Munin, as the city lord, had to manage the entire region and deal with the questioning of the Yang country's imperial court. He had no time to cover up the situation. Among the transcendent cultivators in the soaring dragon realm, only advisor Lu could leave. So he came, and he was confident that he didn't bring any helpers. A Confucian disciple? Jiang Wang asked. My heart is indeed with Book Mountain. Advisor Lu replied. What position do you have? I'm just an advisor in the city lord's residence, but I have no position. Then you're Shi Munin's confidant. Jiang Wang nodded, then asked, Sun Ping's crime and the placards that were posted everywhere, were they written by you? Advisor Lu didn't deny it. My writing is crude. I'm sorry for making a fool of myself. I know a Confucian disciple from the 4 great academies, but his poetry is terrible, and his literary talent is far from yours. My talent is shallow. You're overpraising me. Jiang Wang said, but he's a scholar. You're just a scholar. Advisor Lu seemed to be very good at maintaining his composure. He didn't show any anger when Jiang Wang spoke like that. Instead, he smiled. As the saying goes, education is for all. Even if you're a bird or a beast, as long as you're willing to read, you're a scholar. What you're saying is the merit of education. I'm not talking to you as the Zhenggenjia's envoy, but as the city lord of Qingyang Town. Qingyang Town is only given to the Zhenggenjia for 30 years. To be precise, you're only the city lord of Qingyang Town for 30 years. Advisor Lu calmly added limits to Jiang Wang, finding loopholes and filling in gaps. He smiled as if everything was under his control. Please ask. I'll tell you everything I know. This person's eloquence was really extraordinary. Compared to his identity as a Confucian disciple, he was more like a famous disciple. However, Jiang Wang's voice was as cold as ice. I've already asked. Now it's time to answer. He took a step forward and pulled out his sword. Out of nowhere, Advisor Lu took out a folding fan and unfolded it in front of him. Chi! With only a soft sound, The Changhyang Longi easily pierced through the impressive folding fan like a hot knife through butter. The cold light was already in front of him. Advisor Liu fluttered back and sang, "I'm good at cultivating my noble spirit." In front of him was a vast expanse of whiteness, and the chi was like a soaring dragon. The Confucian sect's most representative killing technique was the use of the noble spirit. Advisor Liu's cultivation was not weak. However, at this moment, Jiang Wang was Jiang Wang, who had suppressed his killing intent for 10 days. Sometimes killing was a means, sometimes it was an end. When it was a means, no matter the reason. When it was an end, there was no excuse. I don't know that a black heart can give birth to righteousness. The sword glowed. The sun and the moon shone brightly. Jiang Wang swung his sword. The flood snake was killed, and the white gas was extinguished. "You're on the wrong path." He staggered with his sword behind him. He was already close to Advisor Liu's face. The killing intent in his heart was infinitely expanding. The White Tiger chapter of the Four Spirits training technique was running automatically. Jiang Wang's eyes were red. He directly headbutted. The noble spirit was broken. Advisor Liu reached into his chest and took out a brush. He was about to dodge when the wood chi in his body suddenly went berserk and bound him from the inside out. The Binding Tiger. The Binding Tiger only trapped Advisor Liu, who was in the soaring dragon realm, for a moment. However, Jiang Wang's head had already bumped into it. Bang! Their heads collided, and they both leaned back. Advisor Liu only felt darkness in front of him. Whoosh! Jiang Wang caught the sword with his left hand and pulled it back from right to left. A head flew into the air. Chapter 255. His murderous aura surged wildly, but it was continuously absorbed by the White Tiger chapter. Finally, the moment he cut off Advisor Liu's head, Jiang Wang's murderous aura condensed into one, and the White Tiger chapter reached perfection. The White Tiger was in the west, and the five elements focused on metal and weapons. At this point, the Azure Dragon chapter, Vermilion Bird chapter, Black Tortoise chapter, and White Tiger chapter of the Four Spirits Body Tempering Mantra had all reached perfection. The Azure Dragon, Vermilion Bird, Black Tortoise, and White Tiger shadows of the Four Spirits floated around Jiang Wang, and then entered his body together. The Four Spirits converged, and this military body tempering mantra was finally completed. Jiang Wang felt as if he had endless strength, as if he could take a sword with his body and break it with his fists. This was not an illusion. Although a strong body had always been the symbol of a martial artist, military cultivators were also known for their strong bodies. Now, Jiang Wang could at least deal with meridian cultivators with the strength of his body. East, south, west, wood, fire, metal, water. When a man stood on the ground, he could be the center. Buddhism had a central whirling world, and in a sense, it was a symbol of himself. For Jiang Wang, the Four Spirits Body Tempering Mantra meant that the five elements had reached a balance, and the treasures he had obtained earlier could be used now. Without much movement, the heaven azure cloud sheep in his arms kept shrinking, and pure wood energy kept pouring into Jiang Wang's body. It was like a spring breeze, and all things grew. The exhaustion of 10 days of sleepless nights was gone. Endless energy was born. The heaven azure cloud sheep was a treasure that condensed the essence of wood. It was a spirit born from the heaven azure cloud stone, and the increase in wood energy was not only reflected in quantity, but also in quality. This was a fundamental change. As the heaven azure cloud sheep in his arms shrank, Jiang Wang clearly felt that his understanding of the wood element was deepening. Binding Tiger, Sea of Flowers, Crown of Thorns, and even Flower of Devouring, Vine Snake Coiling Wall, all the wood element Tao techniques opened a new chapter in his eyes. He had a new understanding. Take Binding Tiger as an example. Previously, Binding Tiger could only bind an ordinary soaring dragon cultivator for a breath's time. Against an expert like the Pig Bone Face, Binding Tiger had almost no effect. Even with the support of the Crown of Thorns, it barely lasted for more than a breath of time. However, if Jiang Wang were to face the Pig Bone Face Man again, he was confident that he could tie up the Pig Bone Face Man for half a breath of time. After using the crown of thorns, the duration could exceed 1 breath. In a battle of life and death, this was the deciding factor. In terms of cultivation speed, Jiang Wang needed 10 days to master Binding Tiger, but after absorbing the heavenly clear cloud sheep, the time needed was shortened to 5 days. The benefits brought by the azure cloud sheep were not limited to this. After entering a new chapter in his understanding of the wood element, Jiang Wang clearly felt that he could already touch the threshold of low-grade A-grade wood element Taoist technique. For example, Wang Zhangxiang's Wind Sparrow True Spirit had helped him, allowing him to master the Breath Tornado in advance. The effect brought about by the heavenly clear cloud sheep was similar. In other words, if the Taoist technique that he won from Zhang Wuyong belonged to the wood element, he could start to cultivate it now. The reason why Jiang Wang wasn't certain that he would succeed was because he had only absorbed half of the heavenly clear cloud sheep. The other half was left for Cheng Gengsheng. A gentleman loves wealth, but obtains it in the right way. Cultivation resources were the same. Maybe Cheng Gengsheng didn't care, but Jiang Wang could not care. Other people had their generosity, but Jiang Wang had his persistence. Jiang Wang had his persistence. All these changes happened in his body, but Jiang Wang didn't stop. Jia City was divided into an inner city and an outer city. With the city lord's mansion as the core, the most luxurious restaurants, shops, gambling houses, the most prosperous core of Jia City was the inner city. Or it could be said that this was the real Jia City that many people saw. The real Jia City had nothing to do with the ordinary people living in the outer city. Even if compared to the townspeople and villagers, they could already be considered city people. But in reality, they were still outside the city. A very obvious fact was that the ordinary people were still ignorant and could only be referred to as diseases. The mortality rate of the diseases in the inner city was much lower than in the outer city. It could even be said that they already had initial control over it. The living necessities of the families and courtyards in the inner city were all bought by servants. It couldn't be denied that Shi Zichu had put in a lot of effort, but this priority was expressed from the inner city to the outer city, and from the inner city to the outer city. This was the difference in status between the outer city and the inner city. The inner city also had high walls, and as early as 5 days before the outer city was sealed, the inner city was already sealed off. Because at that time, because of fear, many people from the outer city began to rush into the inner city. Jia City City Lord's mansion was under pressure and had no choice to seal off the inner city from the outer city. At this time, many people would think about a question that they wouldn't normally think about. The outer city walls were used to guard against vicious beasts and enemies. The inner city walls, who were they used to guard against? With Teacher Lu's current status in Jia City, his death was enough to cause a commotion in the entire city. But the doors and windows on both sides of the street were tightly shut, and the people were very cold. They couldn't even feel the gazes of many people. Jiang Wang remembered the first time he came to Jia City, and how the environment here was good for people. At that time, people were weaving together, bustling with activity. Young ladies and young wives were bold and passionate, talking about which family's young masters without restraint. The Shi family's young master returned to the city grandly, attracting thousands of people to gather and watch. It was so lively back then. Now, the streets were empty. Not even a dog could be seen. Could it be that the cause of all this was the plague that the common people didn't even know the truth of? Natural disasters are merciless, but man-made disasters are more severe. Jiang Wang muttered. He walked forward. In front of him were high gates and thick walls. The city gates were tightly shut, and on top of the city gate stood Shi Munin, who had hurried over. It was obvious that he was very haggard. His usually well-groomed beard and hair were now very messy. In just a few days, there was a lot of white frost on it. Now, he had to admit that he had underestimated the white-boned sect's terrifying methods, and he had to admit that he had underestimated the plague. He had to admit that he had overestimated the East King Valley's methods and himself. He had thought that everything could be resolved quietly, that the common people wouldn't know what had happened, and that all the disasters would be eliminated. The Shi family would be like those years in the past, standing tall on this piece of land without falling. He could still go one step further and become the governor of Rizhao County, or even further. Even now, when the situation was so dangerous, he still made a wrong judgment. He thought that advisor Liu alone would be able to stop the Zhenggenjia's envoy, Jiang Wang. He didn't even need to resort to force. It was nothing more than an exchange of interests. With just a glib tongue, he could make Jiang Wang return home. Advisor Liu himself thought so too. His corpse was still lying on the long street, with no one to collect it. At this time, Shi Munin stood on top of the city gate tower with his hands behind his back, and behind him were a total of 15 transcendent cultivators. 9 meridian wandering cultivators, 4 heavenly cycle cultivators, and 2 heavenly ascension cultivators. This was already all the transcendent forces that Jia City could freely mobilize. In other words, it was a necessary protection force. Jiang Wang held a sword in one hand and stood in front of the city gate, looking down from the sky. It was as if Jiang Wang alone had surrounded the entire city. Chapter 256. On the city gate tower, the flag of Jia City fluttered in the wind. People in Qi worshiped purple. Yang country used the red sun as their totem. They used to worship the color red, but ever since they became Qi's vassal state, the culture changed. Now, purple was the most expensive color. There were still a few places that kept their traditions. Jia City was one of them. Jia City's flag had a red base with carp patterns embroidered on the edges. In the middle, there was the word Jia in Yang. The only places where Yang country's words could still be seen were probably on these flags. Whether they liked it or not, the entire Yang country's government was already promoting Qi's words. The fish in Jia City's lake was delicious, and there was a saying that the carp would turn into a dragon. The carp pattern on the flag was not only to gather good fortune, but also to announce the ambition of the city. From afar, the red flag looked like it was dyed with blood. Back then, the ancestors of the Shi family had indeed shed their blood to establish the foundation of Jia City. After a few generations of management, the prosperous Jia City that Jiang Wang saw for the first time was born. At this moment, Jiang Wang was alone outside the inner city gate, one man and one sword surrounding the city. But it wasn't Jiang Wang who was surrounding the city. It was the plague that was wreaking havoc everywhere. The invisible ones that were silently contagious, the visible ones that were tortured to death. The plague was like an army surrounding the city. On the city gate tower, Jia City's president, Munan, stood with his hands behind his back. The army had already surrounded the city, and there were sounds of war coming from all directions. Today, when the war drums were heard, who would the second or third son be? Jiang Wang looked up. May I ask if killing you is enough for the red flag? There was a moment of silence. Shi Munan came to see Jiang Wang's attitude. More accurately, he wanted to know the attitude of the Zhenggenjia behind Jiang Wang. He didn't expect Jiang Wang to be so resolute. There was no room for negotiation. But he was Shi Munan, the president of Jia City. After a moment of silence, he pointed his halberd downwards. Since words were useless, then there was no need for words. Now that things had come to this, it was time to decide life and death. Shi Munan wouldn't let others look down on the Shi family's courage. The transcendent guards behind him fell like rain, like arrows leaving the bow. 15 transcendents jumped down from the wall, forming a long arrow. 2 heaven ascension cultivators were the arrowheads, for heavenly cycle cultivators were the feathers, and 9 meridian roaming cultivators were the body of the arrows. In an instant, it accelerated to the extreme, and all the power blended together to form this huge and incomparably sharp arrow. No matter how small the Yang kingdom was, it was still a country. No matter how weak Jia City was, it was still a city. Naturally, there are also battle formations and military tactics. The combined power of 15 transcendents was enough to fight someone of a higher realm. In fact, the most frightening aspect of a military cultivator, and also the foundation of the military, was their ability to kill on the battlefield. Among them, the art of battle formations was the most well-known. On the battlefield, tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of soldiers formed a super battle formation. It was enough to destroy a city or a country and defeat a transcendent with a mortal body. On the battlefield, the number of transcendents who died at the hands of ordinary soldiers was innumerable. As a result, in the eyes of a true military strategist, there was no difference between man and heaven. This elite team of 15 transcendents was using the Shi family's battle formation that had been passed down for many years. This formation was born out of one of the most basic battle formations of the military, the arrow formation. It had a unique style and was extremely destructive. However, even within the Heaven Ascension realm, there was still a huge gap between them. These two Heaven Ascension cultivators were only ordinary Heaven Ascension experts. And Jiang Wang was one of the small number of people who had reached the limit of the Heaven Ascension realm. The arrow formed by the 15 transcendents plunged into a sea of flowers. Vigorous chi stirred up the sea of flowers, but the flowers withered and grew again. The complicated sea of flowers concealed its position, causing this arrow to become a headless fly. They had been on the battlefield for a long time and knew that the more the situation was like this, the more they couldn't separate. Therefore, they became even more immersed in the art of battle formations. Boom, boom, boom. That was the sound of the flames mixed in, constantly colliding with the arrow and exploding. However, once the arrow left the bow stopped, its momentum would be exhausted and its sharpness would weaken. An arrow at the end of its flight would not be able to pierce through the cloth. Jiang Wang's sword slashed out the sun, the moon, and the river of stars across the sky, breaking the formation of soldiers, scattering this arrow, and even cutting open the sea of flowers he had set up. The 15 transcendents were scattered in the air, and at this moment, Shi Munin, who was about to attack together, had just landed. Jiang Wang rose from the bottom and slashed his sword in the air again. A sword of mountains and rivers. The surging momentum was unstoppable. Shi Munin had just reached this point when he was slashed back to the city tower. Jiang Wang used the momentum to turn around. His somniferous longing moved like a flood dragon and flashed like lightning, slashing left and right in one breath. 15 consecutive slashes. Jiang Wang stepped on the ground with his sword. Bang, bang, bang. 15 consecutive slashes, and 15 corpses fell. Like a blooming flower, Jiang Wang was wrapped in it. Each corpse was a petal, and Jiang Wang was like a blooming flower. He raised his head again and looked at Shi Munin. Fresh flowers filled the sky, covering the entire inner city walls. The sea of flowers bloomed again. Today's Jiang Wang was even stronger than when he killed the pig-bone-faced man. The sea of flowers was an exquisite Taoist technique, and it was only now that its power was fully displayed, causing Shi Munin to lose his bearings and not know where he was. On the city tower, Shi Munin waved his sleeves, and a seal appeared in his hand. He opened his mouth and ordered loudly, "100 flowers wither." This seal was the seal of Jia City's city lord. Shi Munin mobilized the power of the entire Jia City and issued the order. His every move was supported by thousands of people. Using Yang country and Zhuang country as a comparison, regardless of whether the imperial court was independent or not. Just looking at the various cities, the power of the city lords in Yang country was much greater than that of Zhuang country city lord. Although these two countries had a prefectural city system, each city lord was like a lord and had the right to self-rule in name. However, in Zhuang country, under the control of the imperial court, there was no city that had an independent family that could operate for more than 3 generations. For example, Maplewood City's Wei Qiuji was already the new city lord. On the other hand, the Shi family had been in Jia City for a few generations, and it had become a country within a country. This situation was not unique in Yang country. This was also the reason why the Shi family was so against Yang country's imperial court interfering in Jia City's politics, because it concerned their own interests. The benefit of this operation for the Shi family was that they had successfully tied Jia City and the Shi family together as one. One of the specific manifestations was that they could truly mobilize the power of the entire Jia city. When Wei Qiji died in the battle at the city lord's residence, it was not that he did not want to mobilize the power of the city, but that he could not. He had not been in charge of Maplewood City for long enough, and his power was actually given to him by the imperial court. However, the lifeless formation had cut off his connection with the imperial court. In Jia City, Shi Munin held the seal of Jia City and was supported by the power of the city. Once the order was issued, the flowers withered. Jiang Wang's figure holding a sword was clearly imprinted in his eyes. The sea of flowers was destroyed, and they would not be able to rise again for a short period of time. Shi Munin's face was ashen, and his heart was filled with hatred. He ordered again, "You deserve death for your crimes." Rumble. A sudden clap of thunder sounded. In the clear sky, a sudden clap of thunder sounded and instantly descended upon Jiang Wang's body. Flaming flowers bloomed one after another. In an instant, Jiang Wang shot out 7 flaming flowers. They formed a vertical line and collided with the thunder. However, it did not even last for a breath's time. The flaming flowers exploded and the thunder struck. Densely packed rattan snakes intertwined and wrapped around Jiang Wang. Rattan snake wall. The flower of devouring bloomed, but as soon as it bloomed, it was extinguished. The entire rattan snake wall also collapsed. All of this happened too quickly, so much so that the sound of the 7 flame flowers exploding and the sound of the rattan snake coiling around the wall converge in one place. Yet both were covered by the sound of thunder. Chapter 257. Returning to 5 days ago. In the great illusionary realm, in the Galaxy Pavilion, Jiang Wang and Cheng Geng-sheng sat across from each other. "You've already decided?" Cheng Geng-sheng asked, his hands on his knees. "I can't see the innocent corpses in the wilderness. I can't listen to the voice of justice in the dark room. If no one raises a fire in the dark, tonight will be eternal night. If no one speaks up for this, silence will be an accomplice. I'm in Qingyang town. I've taken over the authority to govern this place. Then, this is my duty and responsibility." Jiang Wang also held his knees, his back as straight as a sword. "I must kill Jia City's mayor. The Shi family has operated Jia City for hundreds of years. You can't treat the Shi family's patriarch as a normal soaring dragon cultivator. The difficulty of killing him may exceed your imagination. But for this trip, I won't ask about anything else." Cheng Geng-sheng was silent for a while, then asked, "How about a fight?" "No." Jiang Wang refused. "I don't want to vent this anger." Cheng Geng-sheng then understood that Jiang Wang's attitude was irreversible. Thus, he asked, "When do you plan to act?" "When I'm done with my current affairs, I'll control the plague in Qingyang town." Only now did Jiang Wang's voice reveal a trace of unconcealable exhaustion. At that time, he'd already worked for 5 days and 5 nights without rest. Looking at Jiang Wang's eyes, Cheng Geng-sheng finally said, "Go ahead. I'll raise the flag for you. Jia City, under the inner city walls." Shi Munin pressed his hand on the seal of Jia City's mayor, and with a command, the condemnation lightning instantly arrived. It broke through 7 flame flowers, flower of ingestion, and vine snake coiling wall, and landed on Jiang Wang's body. Using the power of the domain, life and death were in his hands. Condensing power with power, combining power with law, this was the orthodox method of legalism. Boom! Jiang Wang's entire body was unavoidably covered by the condemnation lightning. Electric snakes scuttled, charring everything black. There was even a faint smell of meat wafting out. He seemed to have died, but his hand was still tightly gripping his sword. He was like a piece of charcoal, but he stood there like a sword that refused to bend. Even if he was going to die, even if he was already dead, after continuously using his domain, the light of the city lord's seal in his hand dimmed. Who knew how much effort he would have to put in if he wanted to fill it up again? Shi Munin did not even have the time to feel sorry for her as he continued to stare at Jiang Wang. With the help of the power of domain, the power of this punishing thunder had far exceeded the limit of his strength. It was close to the attack of an intermansion realm expert. The most important thing was to get through the current situation. Even if he had to offend the Jungenjia, he would not hesitate. Thump, thump, thump. He heard a very faint heartbeat. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. Faint breathing sounds could be heard. The heartbeat was soft and weak at first, but it gradually became louder and louder. Finally, the heartbeat sounded like a drum. The breathing sound was faint at first, but it gradually became louder and louder. In the end, it sounded like a thunderstorm. Thinking back to the battle between Ji Xian and Miao Yu, Jiang Wang was only able to catch Miao Yu. He was injured and spat out blood just from the insignificant aftershock. Now he was facing the punishing thunder head-on. His limited defense was instantly destroyed. He could even clearly feel the process of his life being annihilated. It was a very uncomfortable feeling. Time felt like it was being stretched out. That kind of pain flowed by bit by bit. Then, a force was born from the Tongtian Palace. It originated from the netherworld candle that had been silent for a long time. It spread to his limbs and bones and merged with his blood. This was the soul return technique that was used on Miao Yu. Because the netherworld candle had resided in his body for a long time, his body could completely withstand the white bone sex secret technique. Immediately after, the azure dragon, white tiger, vermilion bird, and black tortoise circled around his body and disappeared into his skin. The four spirits were complete, and wood energy was born. The green wood energy rose from his liver and nourished his internal organs from inside out. Finally, his heartbeat was like a drum, and his breathing was like a thunderstorm. The charred skin fell off, and new skin was like snow. His hair fell like ashes and was born without waiting for the spring breeze. His new black hair reached his shoulders and scattered behind him. Jiang Wang immediately stood up and shot in front of Shi Munin, who had a shocked expression on his face. "Do you know why the seal didn't kill me?" Jiang Wang asked loudly. One sword, like mountains and rivers collapsing, rivers and seas flowing. Clang! It was Shi Munin who used Jia City's Castellan seal to block Chang Xiangxi. Crack! It was an extremely soft, cracking sound, but it was louder than thunder in Shi Munin's ears, because this Castellan seal was the accumulation of Jia City's fortune. It was the wish of Jia City's hundreds of thousands of citizens. It was supposed to be indestructible and unbreakable. How could it crack? Shi Munin was a smart person. Of course, he could think of the reason, but it was because of this that he refused to believe. Listen, Jiang Wang's voice softened. This is the sound of the people's hearts shattering. It's the sound of your Shi family's fortune being cut off. You treat the citizens like dirt, and the citizens see you as their enemy. He raised his sword. It was like a shooting star that streaked across the sky. It illuminated Shi Munin's furious eyes. Preposterous! Shi Munin flipped his hand to summon the carp-patterned red flag. The flag unfurled, and like a wave of scarlet blood, it drowned Jiang Wang's sword. My Shi family has nurtured this place for hundreds of years. We have the hearts of the citizens. How can we let this go just because of one thing? Stupid, ignorant fowl and dog. The Castellan of Jia City, who always paid attention to his demeanor, was already flustered and exasperated. Losing soldiers and generals wasn't scary. A temporary victory or defeat wasn't serious. But it was precisely the shattering of the Castellan seal that made him realize what he had truly lost. He had left behind a Shi family's past and threw away the Shi family's future. You think it's your Shi family that's nurturing Jia City's hundreds of thousands of citizens? You're wrong. Jiang Wang drew his sword angrily. Cultivators plow their fields, workers work their jobs, merchants walk the streets, and scholars speak out for justice. This is the foundation of Jia City's prosperity. It's the citizens here that have nurtured your Shi family for hundreds of years. Chang Xiangxi drew out the blood wave from the carp-patterned red flag. Jiang Wang didn't stop. He moved forward and stabbed his sword. The crowd was like the angry sea, and the hatred was like the sea. The water that floated on the boat was also the water that overturned the boat. With a tearing sound, the carp-patterned red flag broke. The sword continued to move forward as if it had never been stopped. Shi Munin changed his position 3 times in an instant, but was forced back by the sword each time, using the sword to seal people, using the people's hearts to pierce the Castellan's heart. Jiang Wang drew his sword back. Pooh! Shi Munin spat out a mouthful of blood, splashing the carp-patterned red flag. He clutched his chest, but couldn't stop his shattered heart. If he hadn't deceived the citizens and caused them to suffer, the Castellan Manor would have lost the hearts of the citizens. Using the thunder of punishment from the Castellan seal of Jia City, should have been able to kill Jiang Wang right there and then. No matter how mysterious the soul rebirth technique was, no matter how strong the Four Spirits body refinement technique was, they were all water without a source. There wouldn't be such a result. At this time, he suddenly thought of something. Those were the words he used to admonish his proud son. If your eyes can only see 3 feet in front of you, then it's better not to look. If your ears can only hear within a wall, then it's better not to listen. East King Valley's 4 senses, 4 senses, 4 senses, 4 senses, and 4 senses have turned you into a blind, deaf, and fool. You only believe in the little things you know. Haven't I also used everything I've seen, heard, and experienced to block out the future I can imagine? He thought. The Castellan seal of Jia City fell from his hand and smashed into pieces on the city wall. Countless faint specks of light scattering all over Jia City. It was returning the city's fortune with a family fortune, using blood as a sacrifice to the red flag. Chapter 258. Jiang Wang put away the flag and jumped off the city wall. Fang Jia City's city lord seal was the real treasure. He could have saved it, but he didn't. Jia City's current situation was in dire need of nourishment. The school of legalism focused on power and law. It was the righteous path. Gathering the power of the entire city and spreading it out in all directions was originally a mutually beneficial thing that could increase both sides' strengths. But the people of Jia City had been hurt. Squandering power was like drinking poison to quench one's thirst. If he let it dissipate, the entire city's fate would return to the people. Who knew how many people he could save? He jumped off the city wall and entered the inner city. The entire city became even quieter. It made people feel like they had arrived at a dead city. The city lord and his transcendent guards had all died in battle. No one dared to stand up for them. Or rather, no one was willing to stand up for the Shi family. Jiang Wang continued walking forward, adapting to the changes in his body, not to mention the mysteries of the nether candle. It should be said that the newly perfected Four Spirits body refining technique had saved his life. If it weren't for the Four Spirits body refining technique, he might not have been able to withstand the thunder of punishment, even if it hadn't been at full power. The military school's method was to gather troops. The legalism school's method was to use power. They were both righteous. No wonder they were prominent figures. He was just following his heart. But because of this, the 3 swords of heaven, earth, and man had a breakthrough. He had become stronger, but the heaven and earth gate had also become stronger. Unlike the wandering meridian state and the heavenly cycle state, which built the foundation, the reaching heaven state was right in front of the heaven state. There was a lot of room for exploration. Many people saw the limit of the reaching heaven state as the limit of a mortal's body. But in history, only the people of Tianjiao had been able to reach it. Right now, Jiang Wang was also gradually approaching that limit. He turned the corner and saw a soldier in leather armor. He didn't know what he was going to do. When he saw him, he turned around and ran. But he hadn't even reached the transcendent state. How could he run? Jiang Wang caught up with him easily. He grabbed the back of his neck and threw him to the ground. "Where's Shi Zichu?" The person was trembling with fear, but he gritted his teeth and said, "I don't know. I won't kill you. There aren't many people who are willing to stay outside to protect this city at this time," Jiang Wang said as he walked away. "Young master too." The soldier suddenly shouted from behind, "Young master, she's also a person who is currently protecting this city." Jiang Wang ignored him. It was not difficult to find Shi Zichu. Tracing could point out the direction, and the place where the transcendents gathered in the city should be where Shi Zichu was hiding. Finally, They arrived at a small courtyard. It was Shi Zichu's courtyard outside of the Shi family. Jiang Wang had been to this small courtyard several times. Every time he came, it was different. The first time he came here, a beautiful maid led the way and a beautiful woman poured wine for him. The second time he came, he didn't even enter the door. This time, the gates were wide open and the artificial mountains and pavilions were all gone. There were sick people everywhere, lying in all the places where they could lie. Wails, cries, coughs, and the smell of medicine and blood rushed over. Of course, there were no beautiful maids or beauties, only tightly wrapped doctors hurrying back and forth. Jiang Wang walked in the courtyard, but no one came to ask him. No one cared about who he was, what he wanted to do, or what he wanted to do. Finally, he walked in front of Shi Zichu. The sword was shining in his hand. After killing so many people, the Sauvignon Blanc was still not stained with a trace of blood. At this time, Shi Zichu was performing acupuncture on a patient. Behind him, there was a long line of infected people. If he hadn't become a transcendent, he would have died from the plague. Jiang Wang sheathed his sword. Since coming out of Qingyang town, his killing intent had been exhausted. After Shi Zichu finished treating the patient in front of him, he glanced at Jiang Wang and quickly threw himself into treating another patient. He said, "Envoy, please go back. I don't have time to be perfunctory with you. I don't have time to fight with you." He was probably tired, or maybe it was because of the time he spent with the infected that he had some subtle changes. Usually, he wouldn't have said such direct words. Jiang Wang looked around. There were many transcendent cultivators in this small courtyard, but everyone was very busy and didn't care about the outside world. They were wholeheartedly focused on fighting the plague, just like Zhu Biqiong and the others before. "How long have you been doing these things?" "I don't remember. There's no need to remember." "No one told you?" Jiang Wang asked. "What did they say?" Shi Zichu said impatiently. Perhaps it was disappointment, or perhaps it was fear. Perhaps there was no one who could be distracted to find out the news. In short, no one told him that Shi Munin was dead. "Your father failed in his duty, so I killed him." Shi Zichu stood up abruptly and glared at Jiang Wang. His tired eyes were overflowing with killing intent. "It's not a joke. You can make any joke." Jiang Wang noticed that the atmosphere around him changed when he said that. The patients, doctors, and transcendent cultivators almost all had the intention to kill him. This comforted him. It meant that at least here, Shi Zichu still had some support. "Save the people first." "I'm right here, I won't run," Jiang Wang said. "The city seems to be sick. Medicine isn't my forte. I'm here to get an answer from you." He asked, "Use strong medicine to treat a bad disease. What do you think?" "You're not welcome here." Shi Zichu sat down coldly. He didn't believe that Shi Munin, who held the seal of Jia City and the red cart pattern flag, would be killed by this heaven ascension realm Jiang Wang. No matter how strong he was, it was impossible. Even so, he couldn't stand such a conversation. But because of the dying patient in front of him, he couldn't act up immediately. By now, you should be clear that your treatment here is just a drop in the bucket. It can't stop the spread of the plague. You should immediately seek help from Yang Court and announce the truth to the entire region. Mobilize all forces, seal off the entire region, isolate the infection, and check every household. Treat every patient. Shi Zichu fell silent. As a cultivator from the East King Valley, how could he not know this, especially when he personally came into contact with countless patients? Jiang Wang wasn't wrong when he said that Jia City's city lord was negligent. This thing can help you. Jiang Wang took out the red car pattern flag and threw it in front of Shi Zichu. This flag was Jia City's city flag. Although it was damaged, it was still a treasure. Jiang Wang threw it out without a trace of reluctance. Because in Jia City, only Shi Zichu could mobilize all forces to fight against the plague. And the red car pattern flag could only be used in his hands. When Shi Zichu saw the red car pattern flag, he was first stunned, then enraged. With this city flag here, it was enough to prove that Jiang Wang was telling the truth. He wasn't joking or complaining. He really did kill Shi Munin. Tao essence surged in Tongtian Palace, and Shi Zichu stood up, but a pair of hands pressed down on his shoulders. The turbulent Tao essence surged endlessly. Jiang Wang pressed down on Shi Zichu and directly used his Tao essence to collide with Shi Zichu. The result of the collision was that Shi Zichu once again sat back in his original position. I can kill you now, and you can kill me now. But the most important thing now is to save the citizens of the city. Between us, this is a private matter. Our deaths are as light as a feather. We can decide after this. The hatred of killing my father is irreconcilable. Shi Zichu had been exhausted for a long time and was temporarily restrained, but he couldn't stop his hatred. He bared his teeth and roared. Your father was the city lord, but he hid the plague. How many fathers and mothers did he kill? How many sons and daughters did he kill? Jiang Wang roared even louder. You can find me for revenge, but you have to face their revenge first. Resolve the hatred of hundreds of thousands of Jia City citizens. Otherwise, what right do you have to die, and what right do you have to talk about hatred? Shi Zichu couldn't move, but blood seeped out of his eyes. I will definitely kill you. Jiang Wang, I will definitely kill you. Do what you have to do, and then I'll wait for you. Jiang Wang let go of his hand, and under countless complicated gazes, turned and left. After Jiang Wang left, Jia City's city lord's mansion finally posted a new notice to the citizens and officially began the curfew of the city, isolating every household. However, this day came too late. The plague had already broken out. Chapter 259. She was the 54th year of the Yuan Feng era. The Yang country would remember this year. Not just the Yang country. In the 6th month of this year, a terrifying plague broke out. The plague started in Jia City and spread to Yu City. The scariest thing was that for more than a month after the plague broke out, both Jia City and Yu City tried their best to cover up the news. It took more than a month for the plague to spread before the world knew about it. The real cause of the plague outbreak in the Yang country was the Rong country. In Luoguang City, a city bordering Rong country and Yang country, there were 3 cases of the plague. Luoguang City was not governed by the city lord. As a border city, the garrison general held the highest authority. The name of the general stationed in Luoguang City would be remembered by the people for a long time to come, and the entire Yang country's military and government would be pinned to the pillar of shame. His name was Jingyi. When he found out that 3 people had died from the same disease, he immediately investigated the case and quickly confirmed that it was the plague. Then he immediately implemented military control and sealed off the entire city, effectively stopping the plague from spreading into the Rhone country. Under Jing Ye's decisive measures, only 5 people died from the plague in the entire Yuguang city. After investigating all the people who came into contact with the 3 victims, Jingyi found that the source of the plague was an old man who entered the country from the Yang country and was suspected to be a spy. He thought that this was a dirty trick by the Yang country. Following this line of investigation, he found out that the person came from Yu City in Rizhao Prefecture of the Yang country. However, the plague in Yu City was already very serious. Jingyi reported the results of his investigation, and the Rhone country immediately announced it to the world and sealed off the border between the 2 countries. The world was shocked. It was the 13th day of the 6th month. On the other hand, Jia City only announced the truth on the 14th day of the 6th month and officially sealed off the entire city. They also sent a letter to the Yang court asking for help. On the 13th day of the 6th month, the Yang court even sent a letter condemning the Rhone country for malicious slander, saying, "Dirty tricks, damaging the country's reputation." On the 14th day of the 6th month, they finally started to face the situation and immediately sent people to investigate. As for the Jia City's mayor being killed in the streets, this would normally cause a huge uproar, but not many people paid attention to it. Because at this time, Yang Court discovered that the plague had spread to the entire Rizhao County. It had spread to Redtail County and was approaching Hingyang County, where the capital was located. All 3 major prefectures of the Yang Kingdom were affected by the plague. In the grand main hall of the underground palace, The white bone path's sacred lord sat on a high chair, his face expressionless. The bone emissary stood at the bottom of the stairs and said respectfully, "Holy Lord, the plan is almost complete. Our people have successfully spread the plague. It's a small country in the eastern region that I personally selected. It's tens of thousands of miles away from here. Zhuangting didn't expect us to be there, and the people of the eastern region didn't expect our white bone path to be involved. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to find us. I will tell me after the plan is done. You will understand me." The Saint Lord spoke word by word, but his voice was flat and emotionless. There was only endless indifference and coldness. "Yes, I know my mistake." The bone envoy's tone was humble. "Because this matter involves the Holy Lord's great plan, I can't help but be cautious. Many times I don't dare to make decisions on my own. Matter is not allowed to disturb." The Saint Lord's way of speaking was very uncomfortable. Every word was neither too high nor too low, and it hung in the most uncomfortable position for the listener. Zhang Linchuan's expression couldn't be seen clearly under the mask, but he bowed respectfully. "Yes, Holy Lord." Because his head was lowered, no one could see the smile in his eyes. After the bone emissary retreated, the entire hall fell silent again. After a long time, the Saint Lord suddenly said, "The glory belongs to me and also to you." This time, it was much more natural. However, there was no response. The Holy Lord's expression seemed to never change, and his eyes didn't waver. However, if someone looked closely, they would be able to see the subtle difference in his emotions. Of the two eyes, one was indifferent, the other was calm. Walking in a long corridor with flickering candlelight, their footsteps were steady, and they made a lonely sound. Zhuang Gaoxian was overseeing the capital city, Hexen, with his truth, insight, realm strength. Du Ruhui was patrolling everywhere with his imminent skyline ability. As long as they knew about this, no one could escape. There was also a group of elite disciples from the Tao Academy participating in the hunt. The entire Zhuang nation was using the extermination of the Bone Sect as a military exercise. The Bone Sect had almost been uprooted in the Zhuang nation. Only a few of the higher-ups were still struggling at death's door. However, whether it was the Saint Lord, the elders, or the envoys, none of them felt despair. Even Du Ruhui, who was in charge of the hunt, had to admit that this group of evil sect members had an extremely tenacious will. Even if they were burned to ashes, they had to be careful of the possibility of them reviving. He returned to the side hall, where he lived alone. Zhang Linchuan stretched out his left hand, and a round mirror held up by two intersecting bone teeth appeared above his palm. The surface of the mirror was bone white, and after about 3 breaths of time, a beautiful face was revealed. The scenery behind her was blurry, and it was hard to see clearly. "Holy Lady," Zhang Linchuan smiled. "Where are you?" Miao Yu also smiled. This smile seemed to light up the entire dark underground palace. "Where do you want me to be? As a loyal bone envoy, I naturally hope that you can come back and help our Supreme Saint Lord. He wants to complete the establishment of the Divine Kingdom in the main world as soon as possible and usher in the era of bones." "Why wouldn't I want to?" Miao Yu said with a hint of bitterness. "But if I want to help him, he has to be at ease. Is he willing to let me help him?" "Ah." Zhang Linchuan finally laughed out loud. "Perhaps it's not that he's unwilling, but that he doesn't dare. Wang Zhangji is really powerful. He actually made Her Eminence unable to relax for a moment. In the past, I neglected that there was such a person in Maplewood City. Hundreds of thousands of people died, and the entire region was wiped out. Those who were lucky enough to survive, there will always be a few who will fulfill their wishes and succeed." Miao Yu's eyes flickered. No one knew what she was thinking. "Yes, there's also Zhu Weiwa. He really surprised me. In the past, I thought that his invincible aura was only because he was in shallow water and had never encountered violent waves. It was really laughable. Now," Zhang Linchuan clicked his tongue in wonder. Miao Yu didn't continue this topic. Instead, she changed the topic. At that time, Wang Zhangji was resisting inside. Outside, Duruhui forcefully interfered to erase the bone imprint. Huang Fuduoming was also watching. Zhuang Chengqian supported his injured body and hid in the dark. Seeing that things weren't going well, Her Eminence purposely let Wang Zhongji escape and drag the entire Maplewood City into the crack of the netherworld to attract attention. In reality, she wanted to complete her descent without being disturbed and plan for the revival of the Kingdom of God. "So, according to your observation," she asked, "it's been so long, but Her Eminence still hasn't succeeded. It seems that Her Eminence really broke your heart. Your tone doesn't sound regretful at all." Zhang Linchuan asked back. "The Saintess is pure and clean. Her soul is pure and clean. She saves all living things and spreads fairness. How does it feel to have your dreams erased? You and I aren't people who live by dreams." "Yes." Zhang Linchuan sighed. She said something like Her Eminence and Divine Eminence rule together. Her Eminence guards the world while Her Divine Eminence resides in the netherworld. So, it was just a scam from beginning to end. The Daozi was just a vessel for the Divine Eminence to descend. The so-called awakening of the Daozi was just that their consciousness was completely erased by the Divine Eminence. The Eminence is the Divine Eminence. The Divine Eminence is the Eminence. Miaoyu interrupted him. "I don't think you're someone who cares about these things." "No, I have to care." Zhang Linchuan softly laughed again, but he didn't intend to explain. Chapter 260. The White Bone Sect's 12 Divine Manifestations secret technique was said to be the White Bone God's Tao Protector Technique. The White Bone Sect's 12 face cultivators who received this technique were the upper echelons of the White Bone Sect, second only to the envoys and elders. But now, there were only 4 of them left. Ratface and Dogface had died in Maplewood City's City Guard Station during the Battle of Maplewood City. Oxface, Horseface, Sheepface, and Chickenface had been killed by Zhu Weiwa in Buransom City. Tigerface had been killed by Li Jianxiu, who had broken through the Heaven and Earth Gate in the Mo Kingdom's Twin Dragons Club. Even Pigface, who was the craziest and most feared of the 12 face cultivators, had died in a small town under Sun Country's Jia City. 8 of the 12 faced cultivators were gone. Now only Rabbit Face, Monkey Face, Dragon Face, and herself remained. She felt more and more that the upper echelons didn't care about their lives. Even if their cultivation was high and their battle prowess was extraordinary, in the eyes of the upper echelons, they were only slightly stronger chess pieces. This was nothing. The problem was that there weren't many chess pieces left, and the situation was getting more and more dangerous. Soon, it would be her turn. No, she was in a dangerous place right now. Originally, she wasn't afraid of death, but after escaping Maplewood City, her fear of death increased day by day. She didn't want to die. She was able to survive not only because of herself, but also not because of herself. So she was especially unwilling to die. Now, she was walking in Yang Country's territory, covered by a long cloak. Her hands were hanging by her side, and a green thread was wrapped around her slender right index finger. At the end of the green thread, there was a small bell. It swayed along the way without making a sound. The reason why this green thread was emphasized was because it wasn't an ordinary thread, but a green vein. It was a vein pulled out from a cultivator's body and treated with a secret technique. The original owner of this vein was a cultivator from Zhuang Country's Tao Academy. He dared to chase after her because of his hot-bloodedness. Snake Face used his vein to hang the bell, of course, to show his cruelty. Perhaps she didn't realize it was actually her own fear that made her want to intimidate those who were chasing after her. She was originally relieved to be transferred to the East region. She had had enough of the Zhuang Kingdom's pursuit in the name of national enmity. However, after learning of Pigface's death, she was unable to feel at ease. This could be seen from her overly vigilant eyes. However, walking on the road, she was not conspicuous at all. In today's Yang Country, panic and vigilance were all very common emotions. Everyone who was walking on the road had to wrap themselves up tightly. Snakeface even saw several corpses lying on the side of the road. Nobody cares, and maggots grow on their own. When there was no one to collect the corpses, it was a sign of the collapse of a country. Naturally, Snake Face did not have compassion. Therefore, she walked on the road with light steps. This was a temporary order, and he would be able to leave very soon. She would not be like Pig Face, thinking about revenge for someone. His enemy had already died in Maplewood City. How could he still have any enemies? She lightly shook her index finger, and the blue string hanging bell swayed silently. A bell that used human tendons to hang it was, of course, not a simple thing. The white bone path had 12 white bone faces, and the rat bone face was the leader. The rat bone face was dead, but his things were still there. As the leader of the 12 bone faces, the reason he died in Maplewood City was not only because of Big Beard Fong's fearlessness, but also because of Zhao Lang and Wei Yan's excellent cooperation. Another big reason was that the natal Dharma artifact that he refined from the rat bone divine form was too dangerous, so it had always been kept in the white bone path headquarters. As a result, his combat power was not complete. Even an organization like the White Bone Path felt that it was dangerous. It was in the hands of the Snake Bone Face. It was this small bell that could not be shaken, called the Plague Bell. It also had another name, the source of the plague. It was the one that created the plague that was wreaking havoc in Yang country. The one who made the decision was the Holy Lord, the one who made the plan was the White Bone Envoy, and the one who carried out the plan was the Pig Bone Face. Now, the Snake Bone Face took over. To be precise, the real plague bell was a pair, a mother and son bell. The mother bell created the plague, and the son bell absorbed the plague. The mother bell of the plague bell had already completed its mission, and the one in the hands of the Snake Bone Face was the son bell. White bones were exposed in the wild, and there was no sound of chickens for 1,000 miles. The death aura, resentment, and the plague that grew because of it were what the god of the netherworld wanted. The dragon face is only loyal to the Holy Lord. The monkey face is cunning and has connections with everyone. The rabbit face is loyal to the envoy. Elder Lu's thoughts are unpredictable. And the Holy Lady, what does the Holy Lady think? The snake bone face thought faintly. She would not think about such nonsense in the past, but now she had to think about it, and she had to think more about it. The white bone path now was not the white bone path of the past. It would never be the same again. Jiang Wang missed the challenge of the Blessed Land on the 15th of June. He fell into a deep sleep. He had already prepared for the loss of merit, so there was nothing to regret. His only regret was that he missed a chance to fight with a strong opponent. In theory, at his current level, not sleeping or resting was not a big problem. But first, he saved Qingyang Town for 10 days and 10 nights. Then, he entered the city with a single sword and killed the chairman of Jia City, Mu Nan, and a group of transcendent being guards. His body and mind had reached a certain limit, so he had to rely on sleep to recuperate. Duga Xiao moved a stool and sat outside the door. No one could persuade her to leave. He did not know what she would be able to do if she was in danger, since she had only started practicing martial arts not long ago. When Jiang Wang woke up and went out, it was hard to say that he did not feel relieved. But he only asked, "How are things in town?" "It's already under control. There are still people who died, but there are very few new cases." After Xiao Xiao finished speaking, she said happily, "Master, you're awake?" "Yes." Jiang Wang reached out and patted her tender shoulder. "Go and rest. I'll take care of the rest." Xiao Xiao's eyes lit up. This was the first time Jiang Wang had acted so intimately with her. "Master, you killed Castellan Shi?" Her voice also became lighter as she said, "They all said that it was very satisfying." Satisfying? Jiang Wang did not feel proud of this. Instead, he only wanted to sigh. When Sun Ping died, the people in town were also very satisfied. Xiao Xiao could hear the indescribable gloominess in Jiang Wang's voice. She could not help but ask, "Sun Ping, you should remember this name." Jiang Wang walked past Duga Xiao. "He's the true hero. If Master says so, then he definitely is." Jiang Wang shook his head and did not say anything else. In reality, Xiao Xiao did not care about the plague. She did not care about any heroes. She did not even care about the lives of the hundreds of thousands of people in Jia City. She did her best to prove her value, so that she would not be abandoned again. She didn't have the energy to spare for anything else, nor did she want to care about it. She was like this, the invisible but real disease on her body. Wasn't it also another type of plague? How could she heal? Come with me to town, Jiang Wang said. Yes, master. Xiao Xiao jumped in joy behind him. Chapter 261. Go forward. You will always go forward. You will never retreat. But I'm too tired, master. I'm too tired. I'm too tired. I don't want to walk anymore. Have you forgotten? Have you forgotten? Have you forgotten everything? Go forward. Go forward. Go forward. Go forward suddenly woke up. Looking around, he froze for a moment before remembering that he was in the town hall of Qingyang Town. The cold sweat on his back reminded him that he hadn't dreamed for a long time. He hadn't had any memories for a long time. Every day, he would deliberately disperse his Tao energy and fall into a drunken sleep. When he woke up, he would have a splitting headache and couldn't remember anything. That was the best state. Inner peace was so hard to come by. If he couldn't find peace, he would ask for chaos. If he couldn't find relief, he would ask himself to let go. Let go. At this time, the sky was just beginning to brighten. The town hall was full of constables who were sleeping soundly. Go Forward got up and walked out of the town hall. Wearing a single shirt, he randomly chose a direction and patrolled the town. This was what he had been doing recently. In the current situation of the outbreak of the plague, only transcendent stage cultivators could ensure their own safety. Where people needed supplies, where people were infected with the plague and needed to be transferred, where people were taking advantage of the chaos, they all needed to be dealt with by him. Whether it was the naive Zhu Biqiong or Zhang Hai, who was reluctant to leave the pill furnace, they were all the same. He had been busy without a moment's rest. Until now, he finally had a chance to take a break. Jia City had already publicized the truth of the plague and began a comprehensive response. Reinforcements from all sides had arrived. The road was tortuous, but things could finally see a little light. All of this was brought by that young man who confidently said that the inner house wasn't the end, but Go Forward couldn't rest. He had to continue to immerse himself in his busy work so that he could resist the dream that had just woken him up. Yes, during this time, he found a new way to resist the pain. In addition to drinking, he was so busy that he couldn't stop working. After patrolling around, he sent the 2 newly discovered patients to the western town that was specially cleaned up to isolate the infected. The people who had contact with them had also been marked and would be closely observed. The infected people gathered in the western town had risen from the previous 130 people to the current 247 people. However, what could be seen was that after the implementation of strong measures, the number of new patients had been greatly reduced. 2 medical cultivators sent by the Zhonginjia were doing their best to treat the infected. Creating a drug that could cure or at least delay the illness was the best choice, because the infected only had 3 to 5 days from the outbreak of the disease to death. With just 2 medical cultivators treating them one by one, many people might not even be able to last until it was their turn. It wasn't that such drugs didn't exist, but the ones that could be found at the moment were too expensive and unrealistic. There was no point in promoting it. For example, 1 meridian unlocking pill was enough to solve the problem of the plague, but who would invest 247 meridian unlocking pills for the 247 patients in Qingyang Town? What about the entire city? What about the entire Yang Kingdom? There was no force that could or would be willing to bear such a burden. Transcendent cultivators were not affected by the plague, not because they had special methods to deal with the plague, but because they had extraordinary bodies. In fact, the 2 medical cultivators treated the patients day and night, which was already an extremely expensive investment. The Tao primordial stones they consumed and the consultation fees they spent were not something that ordinary people could imagine. Only someone as rich and imposing as Cheng Gengsheng was willing to send them to Jiangwang. They sent the infected people into isolation rooms, personally issued number plates, and registered their names, so that supplies could be uniformly allocated. After doing all this, Xiang Qian turned around and left. There was a pair of eyes following him closely. Xiang Qian turned his head abruptly and happened to see the owner of the line of sight looking at him from a small window on the right side of the building. Bang! Seeing him turn his head, the window was slammed shut. He probably hit his forehead. Ah! There was a scream. He probably fell down. Although it was only a short glimpse, Xiang Qian still saw the scene in the small window with the eyesight of a transcendent cultivator. It was a child who was so thin that he was out of shape. Xiang Qian was thinking about whether to go up and take a look when the small window was pushed open again with a creak. The little boy was probably standing on a stool. He moved closer to the small window and looked somewhat curiously and somewhat fearfully at Xiang Qian. Xiang Qian squeezed out a smile with great effort. Although his smile wasn't very bright, it seemed to give the little boy courage. Today, his lips were pale and blue, and he didn't have much strength to speak. "It's my 7th birthday." This young child's voice suddenly shattered many dust-covered fragments. Xiang Qian vaguely remembered that he could still be considered young. Counting on his fingers, it had been 5 years since he turned 20. He should be a good youth in his prime. However, his appearance, which hadn't been groomed for a long time, and his somewhat rueful stubble made him appear even more aged. Regrettably, how could Xiang Qian not see that this little boy was already like a candle in the wind, the flame of life? "Ah," Xiang Qian said, "congratulations, you've grown another year." "Thank you." The little boy first nodded to express his gratitude, and then asked somewhat curiously, "My lord, are you a bodhisattva who's helping us?" Mother said, "Your bodhisattvas." One of the holy lands of Buddhism, Xiankong Temple, was in the eastern domain. Here, the teachings of Buddhism were spread widely. Bodhisattva was a kind of fruit of Buddhism. Sometimes, it could also refer to people with great merit. We don't rely on bodhisattva. In the face of hardship, we rely on our own efforts. Xiang Qian subconsciously wanted to say this, but he felt that he really didn't deserve to say such high-sounding words. How could he be considered a hard-working person? Therefore, he only asked, "Do you have any wishes?" The little boy thought about it. He was somewhat shy, somewhat hesitant, and somewhat unable to hold back his expectations. "Every year on my birthday, Mother would give me 2 eggs to eat. This should be very easy to solve." Xiang Qian thought, "Where's your father and mother?" He asked the little boy upstairs. The little boy said, somewhat sadly, "Daddy told me that they went out to earn tuition for me. Otherwise, when the plague ghost leaves, I won't be able to go to school." Xiang Qian was silent. At this time, in this place, where else could they go to earn money? There were only 2 ways for this little boy's parents to go out: to be cured or to die. If they were cured, they would not come back to see the child. Therefore, the outcome was obvious. Fighting for the shuxiu was only a gentle lie. "You have to eat eggs on your birthday," Xiang Qian said. "You wait for me." He turned around and ran outside. He ran into the bailiffs guarding the checkpoint to prevent people from entering or leaving. "Do you have eggs?" Xiang Qian asked. The 2 bailiffs looked at each other, not understanding the meaning of this transcendent master. Xiang Qian leapt out of here. "Do you have eggs?" "Who has eggs?" Xiang Qian didn't care too much and asked loudly as he walked. An old woman trembled as she took a piece of bacon from a beam. "Do you want bacon?" "No need, thank you." After asking a lot of people, Xiang Qian discovered that it was actually very difficult to find eggs in Qingyang town today. Not to mention eggs, even chickens had been eaten up. As a transcendent cultivator, he had never cared about these trivial matters, so he didn't know that there was such a shortage of living materials. Finally, he rushed back to the town hall and shouted to Xiao Xiao, who was buried in a pile of official documents. "How come Qingyang town supplies are so poor? Jiang Wang can't even take out these few belongings?" Xiao Xiao raised her head in bafflement. "Don't you know? The plague has broken out in the entire Yang kingdom." Now, it's not a matter of wealth. It's a matter of not being able to buy supplies with money. Then we don't need to care about this kind of thing, because we can't buy supplies, so we give up? Xiang Qian couldn't explain his sudden anger. He only felt that there was a ball of fire in his heart, burning uncomfortably. Looking for recommendation votes, monthly votes, all kinds of votes. I feel like I have a chance to hang at the bottom of the recommendation votes in the Xianxia category this week. That's the 100th place in the Xianxia category this week. Now, I'm only 8 votes away from the 100th place. Although it's useless, it's still a goal. Send me up. Top 100 today, top 10 tomorrow. I still have to have dreams. Chapter 262. In the town hall, Xiao Xiao helplessly replied to Fong Qian's sudden question. We are solving it, and it will be done soon. The Yang Kingdom's imperial court has begun to mobilize the resources of the country. Now that the Four Seas Business Alliance has joined in, they have reached an agreement with Yang Court to ensure that the 3 counties in Yang Kingdom have sufficient resources. Furthermore, our Qingyang town was the first to pay attention to the plague, and we have the most abundant supplies in reserve. I can't guarantee anything else, but at least no one in the town will starve to death. Do you know how rare this is under the current situation? She was implying that her master had spent a lot of money and effort, so Fong Qian had no right to criticize him. Fong Qian didn't seem to have heard her and asked directly, Where are the eggs? Eggs? Xiao Xiao was no longer confused. She was about to go crazy. You came here so aggressively to criticize me, and in the end, you asked me where the eggs? You are a transcendent cultivator. Do you have to be so greedy? Have you never eaten eggs since you were young? I want 2 eggs now. Where are they? There's a warehouse set up by the Four Seas Business Alliance in the east of town. There should be enough resources there. Xiao Xiao said with a blank face, then realized that Fong Qian had disappeared. The Four Seas Business Alliance was headquartered in Qi and was one of the largest business alliances in Qi, on par with the Jubao merchants. It also had a branch in Yang Kingdom, and it was a giant presence. In terms of resources allocation, the Four Seas Business Alliance could surpass a small country like Yang Kingdom in a short period of time. With the Four Seas Business Alliance's participation, Yang Court could put more effort into stopping the plague and eliminating the plague. It was a good thing. However, the Four Seas Business Alliance was not a charity and did not have the obligation to help the people of Yang Kingdom like Yang Court. They participated in Yang Kingdom's disaster relief because it was profitable. In fact, the Four Seas Business Alliance was in charge of all external purchases in Yang Kingdom, and they were also in charge of most of the allocation of resources. Other than the necessary food, the Qingyang town government did not have any other resources. Therefore, even if Fong Qian was a high-ranking official in Qingyang town, he had to go to the Four Seas Business Alliance's warehouse to find 2 eggs. Fong Qian hurried to the warehouse of the Four Seas Business Alliance east of Qingyang town. I want 2 eggs. At this time, the sun in June had already risen high in the sky, and the whole street was starting to heat up. In front of the warehouse, several guards of the merchant union were hiding under the awning and playing with money. They were shaking the dice and betting on big or small. He acted as if he hadn't heard the voice in front of him. I want 2 eggs, he repeated. Who are you? The head of the guards in charge of the dealer asked while shaking the dice without even turning his head. Since he dared to come to the Yang country at this time of the year, he must have manifested his Tao meridians and was a transcendent cultivator. He couldn't be bothered to look at a mere native of Qingyang town. Xiang Qian knew the significance of the Four Seas Business Alliance to disaster relief. He had worked hard for this place for many days and did not want to affect the entire Qingyang town because of himself. Therefore, he restrained himself and said, I am Qianqian. 2 chickens. I don't care who you are or what you want. If you want to take something, either bring real gold or silver or bring the official seal of the town hall. The bodyguard leader cut him off. He put down the dice box and shouted, Place your bets. Only then did he take the time to turn his head and glance forward. Do you understand? Seeing that the other party was also a transcendent cultivator, his tone became slightly gentler. It's all the rules. I only want 2 eggs. My friend. The bodyguard leader couldn't help but emphasize his tone. The eggs are small, but the rules are important. Today you take an egg, tomorrow he takes an egg. Are we still going to manage the warehouse? What do you want the people in the disaster area to eat? If Xiao Xiao were here, She could accurately point out the allocation quota and tell the bodyguard leader that the goods in the warehouse were not allowed to be sold privately. Moreover, the child with the plague had a quota of eggs. Both the Yang country and Xinjiang town had paid for it. But that child did not receive any eggs. That child was dying of the plague. He wanted to eat 2 eggs on his birthday, so he could only ask for help from the bodhisattva in his eyes. This was the negligence of the Four Seas Business Alliance. But here he was Qianqian. He didn't know the situation. He could only endure and say, "I'll give you the official document later. Right now, there's a child who must eat an egg immediately." The bodyguard leader was impatient. "I'll give you the egg later too, okay?" He then said to the others, "Hurry up and place your bets. There's no regret. I'll buy. I'm not selling." The bodyguard leader was disturbed again and again. He said angrily, "Do you want the money to buy a few eggs? Go away." The bodyguards of the Business Alliance who were playing with him all laughed. Perhaps it was the principle that people who were kind would be bullied. The more he acted like he was giving in, the more those people thought he was easy to bully. Yes, what kind of rural place was Xinjiang town, and what kind of poor country was the Yang country? And the Four Seas Business Alliance was a huge organization that dominated the eastern region. Their business had once reached the central region. They also had some say in the Qi department, and countless people looked up to them. Here, who dared to offend them? They laughed heartily and felt a sense of superiority. He let go of the Tao origin stone. He fell silent. He realized that these people did not make sense. If they really wanted to help, a transcendent cultivator would be able to do a lot of things right now. If they were sincere about disaster relief, they wouldn't be in the mood to play with money and be so arrogant. Even he, who was so disheartened and despaired of life, found it unbearable. He simply turned around, took a few steps forward, and kicked the door of the warehouse away. "Damn you!" The bodyguard leader shouted angrily and was about to rush forward with his weapon. But Fang Chong only pointed back, and a cold light flashed past. The bodyguard leader didn't even have time to see what it was before he felt the top of his head lighten. Then he felt cool and his hair fell down. He reached out and touched it. It was smooth to the touch. His long hair had been shaved clean. He froze on the spot and didn't dare to move. If the other party could easily shave his hair, then he could easily chop off his head. Good man," he said in a trembling voice. "The valuable things are in the innermost area. Please take as much as you want." Fang Chong ignored them and quickly found the place where the eggs were piled up in the warehouse. He reached out and took 2. Then he went out and went straight to the west of the town. After walking for a long time, a Business Alliance bodyguard whispered, "Boss, are we still playing?" "Playing your mother's leg." The bodyguard leader slapped him on the head. "Report to the Business Alliance that someone robbed the warehouse." "Just 2 eggs?" Another bodyguard asked. "Do we still have to report this? Are you all blind?" The newly bald guard commander roared. "We've lost thousands of gold's worth of supplies. I, a transcendent being, was almost beheaded after a hard battle. Isn't this dangerous and scary? Shouldn't we report this to the Business Alliance?" Chapter 263. After getting the eggs, Fang Chong rushed to the west of town as fast as he could. The process of finding the eggs took up too much time. He didn't know if the little boy had already been disappointed. The world he saw was terrible and made him despair, but it was fine as long as he was in despair. Children shouldn't be disappointed in this world. Just like the unknown parents, adults use their own unique methods to make the child's beautiful world last longer. This in itself was one of the beauties of this world. Fortunately, when he arrived, the little boy was still at the window. He stared at him from afar with bright eyes. Fang Chong stood downstairs and held up 2 eggs that he had cooked with his Tao energy. "Look!" The little boy's sickly and thin face immediately broke into a smile. "Egg? I'll bring them up for you." Fang Chong shouted. "Don't!" The little boy hurriedly stopped him. "What's wrong?" Fang Chong was puzzled. "Mother said that I have poison on me and can't get too close to others. I'll infect others." At this point, the little boy seemed to be a little sad. His voice also lowered. "Can you help me put them at the door? I'll come out and get them after you leave." Fong Chong suddenly felt a little sour, but he smiled instead. No need to trouble yourself. With that, he jumped up and directly jumped to a position parallel to the little boy. He held the window sill firmly with one hand and handed over the 2 cooked eggs with the other. The temperature of the eggs was just right. "I'm not afraid to play ghosts," he said with a smile. "Are you really a bodhisattva?" The little boy held the 2 eggs in his hands and looked at Fong Chong, who was hanging in the air, with a normal expression. He said with some surprise. Fong Chong purposely didn't deny it this time. He only urged, "Hurry up and eat. It's cooked." Oh, the little boy was hungry after all. He immediately broke one of the eggs. He quickly peeled off the shell. His small hands were very nimble. Then he put the egg in his mouth and took a bite, then another with satisfaction. He ate the entire egg in a few mouthfuls. His small mouth also bulged. Seeing him eat so happily, Fong Chong also felt warm in his heart. He asked, "Do you want to eat anything else?" The little boy shook his head vigorously. He ate the egg and said with a muffled voice, "No more." He swallowed all the eggs in his mouth and paused for a while before saying, "My mother said that it's all thanks to Bodhisattva Zhang's kindness that we can still eat. But you have to restrain your appetite. You can't eat too much because everyone else is waiting to eat. Your mother is really a good person." Xiang Qian had grown up with his master and had never seen his parents before. But he thought that a mother should be such a gentle and great character. Of course, the little boy's pale face regained some color, and he smiled proudly, as if he was happier than being praised. He held the second egg in his hand for a while. Finally, he could not bear to eat it. He said to Fong Chong, "Bodhisattva, can you give this egg to my mother?" It had been a long time since Xiang Qian had smiled as long as she did today. But if he didn't smile, he wouldn't be able to hide those inexplicable emotions. She couldn't possibly shed tears in front of a child, right? He smiled and asked, "Is there no share for your father?" "My father hates eggs the most. Every time they cooked eggs at home, he would not eat them. It's all for me and my mother." What a great pair of parents. Xiang Qian thought and replied, "Okay, I'll help you send it. Then, Bodhisattva, you go help other children." The boy waved his hand and said with vigor, "I'm already 7 years old. I can take care of myself." Xiang Qian jumped down the stairs and replied loudly, "Okay." In the beginning, he ran back and forth to help people with his extraordinary body because he had an agreement with Jiang Wang and had no choice but to do so. Later, he didn't know why he was so immersed in it. Perhaps the reason why he temporarily got rid of the nightmare was not only because he was tired. He didn't ask the little boy's name, because this was a child of Qingyang Town. He wanted to help all the children of Qingyang Town, no matter what their surname was, what their name was, whether they were boys or girls. Walking on the street where there were no pedestrians, Xiang Qian put the whole egg into his mouth and chewed as he walked. He hadn't eaten these things for a long time, but it felt really delicious. When he was questioned by the Four Seas Business Alliance with harsh words, Jiang Wang was at a loss for a moment. He didn't expect that the Four Seas Business Alliance's warehouse in Qingyang Town would be robbed. Was there any other extraordinary power in Qingyang Town other than him? And he actually ignored it? What he couldn't understand was, what was the point of robbing so little resources? When he found out that the person who robbed was Xiang Qian, he was even more confused. It didn't make any sense. Even if Zhang Hai looted those materials in order to refine a mess of pills and stewed them in a cauldron, it was much more logical. Xiang Qian was so world-weary that he wouldn't even move if a whip hit him. How could he have the energy to rob a warehouse? But no matter what, since the Four Seas Business Alliance sent people, he couldn't avoid them. This was the Four Seas Business Alliance. After a preliminary understanding of the situation, Jiang Wang called Xiang Qian to the town hall to confront the people of the Four Seas Business Alliance. "I only took 2 eggs." Facing the Four Seas Business Alliance's harsh criticism, Xiang Qian only said this and didn't say anything else. Ask yourself, a transcendent cultivator seriously injured another transcendent cultivator, then broke through the door of the warehouse, and only took 2 eggs in the end. The bald guard leader's expression was full of indignation, perhaps even convincing himself as he was very engrossed in his own words. Can you believe it yourself? Jiang Wang glanced at Xiang Qian, and seeing that he had no intention of explaining, he directly looked at the Four Seas Business Alliance's manager and asked, "Manager, what do you think of this matter?" Because he had someone backing him, the ball guard leader was very confident and couldn't help but shout, "The facts are right in front of you. What else do you want to say?" This person's voice was like a dog's bark. Jiang Wang ignored him and only looked at the manager of the Four Seas Business Alliance, waiting for his response. The manager of the Four Seas Business Alliance was a middle-aged man with a scholarly face. Compared to a businessman, he looked more like a scholar. Compared to the irritable and anxious expression of his subordinates, he was much calmer and more composed. Even though he knew that the person in front of him was an important follower of the famous Zhenggenjia, Cheng Gengsheng, he couldn't be moved. The Four Seas Business Alliance, which did business all over the world, gave him the confidence to face the various tyrants. In response to Jiang Wang's question, he only said indifferently, "Old Chen has been in the Four Seas for many years. I can trust his words." He only said this sentence and didn't say much, but his attitude was very clear. "Since my people aren't the problem, then it must be your people who are the problem." Jiang Wang also understood. Xiang Qian didn't say anything else. Not because he didn't want to explain, but because he had already explained. If he asked again, it meant that he didn't believe him. "You lost a total of 4,000 gold. Jiang Wang directly asked. This was his attitude, and he agreed to compensate. No matter what, Xiang Qian did indeed rob the warehouse of the Four Seas Business Alliance, and also fought with the warehouse guards. The Zhenggenjia naturally wasn't afraid of the Four Seas Business Alliance, and Jiang Wang wasn't afraid of these small fries in front of him. However, he didn't need to make enemies for Cheng Gengsheng for no reason. It was because they were friends that he had to be wary of Cheng Gengsheng's development. Cheng Gengsheng trusted him in the hope that he would be able to help him, not to cause trouble everywhere. It wasn't impossible to offend the Four Seas Business Alliance, but the prerequisite was that the benefits far outweighed the cost. "I won't hide it from you," the manager of the Four Seas Business Alliance said with a very calm expression. "Originally, we only lost 2,000 gold, but I personally came here, so naturally it's more than that." With only 2 eggs missing, the bald commander reported the loss to the higher-ups for 1,000 gold coins. But after the deacon spun it around, it became 4,000 gold coins. He still wanted to be obedient in front of Jiang Wang and show that he would make things clear and not let him suffer in silence. How could Jiang Wang not know that there was something fishy going on? However, he only nodded his head. "That's reasonable. How about this? My people robbed you of 2,000 gold, so I'll compensate you with 200 Dao origin stones." Jiang Wang asked, "How about this? Is it fair?" As the currency of the cultivation world, Dao origin stones were normally only circulated among transcendents and were not easy to obtain. 200 Dao origin stones, not to mention 2 eggs, even if this guard was beaten to death, it would be enough to compensate. Thus, this manager of the Four Seas Business Alliance was naturally satisfied. He couldn't be more satisfied. "That's reasonable." His eyes lit up, but he quickly restrained himself and nodded his head reservedly. But this was what it meant to be greedy. Seeing that Jiang Wang was so easy to talk to, he was probably greedy. But Jiang Wang continued, "Coincidentally, there's something I want to ask the seniors of the Business Alliance. A while ago, I killed Jia City's Chairman Mu Nan, and your alliance is more well-informed. I wonder what Yang Court's attitude is, and if they are willing to let it go." This manager of the Business Alliance had just arrived in Jia City and knew that the previous city lord was killed, but he didn't know who it was. When he heard these words, he couldn't help but be shocked. Someone who dared to kill the city lord. If he was forced, would he really not dare to kill a manager of the Four Seas Business Alliance? This person covered up the truth and covered up the situation. He offended the heavens. He committed a heinous crime, and everyone has the right to kill him. What's wrong with you killing him? The manager was filled with righteous indignation. This is what every righteous person would do. Yang Court also needs to respect the people. My Four Seas Trading Alliance will also help you deal with it. There's no need to help. No one in Yang court has questioned me, and justice is in their hearts. After Jiang Wang said this, he turned and said, I actually have a request. Please speak. The people of Qingyang town are suffering unbearably. I can't do much, but I hope that they don't lack medicine, meat, and vegetables for their daily needs. Jiang Wang said, I know that the current situation is difficult, and this request isn't reasonable, but I hope that you can do it. To put it bluntly, 200 Dao Essence Stones was to buy peace and also to buy the Four Seas Business Alliance to work hard. Jiang Wang threw the money, and he wanted to hear the sound of it. You really are a rare person who cares about the people. Seeing that it was such a simple request, the manager patted his chest and said, Leave it to me. I guarantee that you have all sorts of resources. But as long as I have something to eat, I won't let the people of Qingyang town starve. Chapter 264. Killing a city lord was a big deal under normal circumstances. However, Shimunin's situation was different. The source of the plague had yet to be found, but Shimunin was undoubtedly the main culprit behind the spread of the plague, whether it was for his family or for his own power. After the outbreak of the plague, he was condemned by everyone in Yang country, and killing him was the wish of the people. Jiang Wang's killing was considered a righteous act in public opinion. Moreover, Jia City only revealed the truth because of his hard work. His contributions didn't need to be mentioned. Everyone could see it for themselves. Secondly, Zheng Genji's 30 years of rule in Qingyang town was recognized by Yang court. Jiang Wang had inherited this kind of ruling power and was willing to risk his life for the people. This made sense. Hence, a manager from the Four Seas Business Alliance dared to say that he was willing to mediate between them. He knew that Yang court might not react. In other words, if Yang court really reacted to this matter, Manager Qian of the Four Seas Business Alliance's circle was obviously nothing. Therefore, Jiang Wang only treated it as a joke. Speaking of which, what would Yang court's reaction be? Jiang Wang didn't think so. Firstly, the outbreak of the plague caused Yang court to be unable to fend for themselves. They even handed over important matters like the allocation of resources to Qi's Four Seas Business Alliance. This exposed Yang country's weakness as a vassal country. It was also the tragedy of a vassal country that didn't have a say in the world. Secondly, it was because of the plague. In the whole of Yang country, Jiang Wang was one of the first people to pay attention to the plague. He was also the first to reveal the truth, almost single-handedly revealing the truth. Although many people hated him, there were even more people who saw him as a hero. It was impossible for Yang Ting not to consider this point. Thirdly, Yang court's lack of control over the various cities had been exposed. The most important thing for Yang court now was to use the plague as an excuse to strengthen their control over the various cities. Any knowledgeable ruler wouldn't overlook this. And to control Jia City, what was the first thing Yang court had to do? Get rid of the Shi family. Coincidentally, the Shi family had concealed the plague and found a good accusation for themselves. If Yang court wanted to use this as an excuse to make things difficult for them, then their reason to hold Jiang Wang accountable would not be valid. Therefore, Jiang Wang was not worried about this at all. The reason why he didn't kill Shi Zichu was very simple. Today, in all of Jia City, there wasn't a second person who could mobilize more power and resources than Shi Zichu, and there wasn't a second person who could replace Shi Zichu in saving people. Of course, he had the confidence that Shi Zichu would not surpass him. Therefore, even if there were suspicions of raising a tiger in order to save more people, he could temporarily hold back his killing intent. Even if the other party really became a tiger calamity, he was confident that he could kill them. If Shi Zichu had displayed talent like Ying Guan and Wang Yuwu, he would not have made such a choice. Instead, he would have killed Shi Zichu the moment they became enemies. After all, only when one is alive can one be courteous and magnanimous, and only when one is prominent can one help the world. There was another reason that had never been stated, but a smart person like Shi Zichu would understand once he calmed down. especially after he found out that Rong had exposed the epidemic a day earlier. In reality, after Jiang Wang saw Shi Zichu's efforts, he gave him a chance to trade, to use all of the Shi family's power as the price for him to use this opportunity to transfer the kindling of his family bloodline. Once Yang Court took over Jia City, with the crimes that the Shi family had committed, there was a possibility that they would be wiped out. Seeing manager Qian of the Four Seas Business Alliance leave with a bag full of Dao origin stones and the arrogant bald head of the guard commander, Xiao Xiao gritted her teeth in hatred, but she wouldn't question Jiang Wang's decision. However, Zhang Hai couldn't help but say, 200 Dao origin stones, are we really going to give it to them just like that? How many pills could they make with that? In his heart, he was actually blaming Fang Qian. Even though it had been hard on them, Jiang Wang wasn't stingy with them and didn't give them any less resources. 200 Dao origin stones wasn't a small amount. Even though these Dao origin stones came from Jiang Wang's own pocket, didn't Jiang Wang's Dao origin stones belong to this small group? This is the value of the Four Seas Business Alliance's name. Jiang Wang said, but if they continue to abuse it like this, it won't be worth this much. Xiao Xiao was deep in thought. Looking at the people in the town hall, Jiang Wang continued, I hope that one day our signboard will be known as a famous name. A name can make people give in and admit defeat. When that time comes, please cherish it. What he didn't say was that even though these 200 Dao origin stones were to destroy the Four Seas Business Alliance as quickly as possible, a part of it was also because of Fang Qian. From the beginning to the end, Xiang Qian, who looked like a destitute uncle, didn't say anything. His dead fish eyes were drooping, as if he didn't care about anything. Only when Jiang Wang finished speaking did he nod slightly to show that he was listening. Sir Warden, that Jiang guy is so rich. Why didn't you ask for more? On the way out of Qingyang Town Hall, the guard leader couldn't help but ask, does he dare to fall out with the Four Seas Business Alliance? Idiot! Warden Qian scolded. How much can a mere Jiang Wang be squeezed out of him? The Business Alliance's disaster relief business in the entire Yang country is where the real profit lies. I won't shortchange you for the extra 1,000 Dao origin stones, and you're not allowed to embezzle from the warehouse. If you dare to mess things up, I'll kill you with my own hands. Yes, the bald guard leader was unwilling, but he could only nod in agreement. He wasn't stupid, of course. He knew where the real big fish was. Plundering the entire Yang country's profits was not something that could be compared to exploiting a small lord like Jiang Wang. But no matter how much the Four Seas Business Alliance earned, what did it have to do with him? What was in his hand was his. He knew that Warden Qian was stingy, but he didn't expect him to be so stingy. He took 200 Dao origin stones, but only gave him 1,000 Dao origin stones. But the situation was more powerful than the person, and the higher the rank, the higher the rank. There were hundreds of wardens in the Four Seas Business Alliance, and Warden Qian wasn't much among them, but it was easy for him to deal with a guard leader like him. After this incident, he finally understood that the young cultivator called Jiang Wang was truly a ruthless person compared to the one who had shaved him bald after kicking the door open and snatching the eggs. Throwing out 200 Dao origin stones at once, he cleanly shut Warden Qian up. This was an expression of attitude. After staying in the Business Alliance for so many years, he understood one thing. The more extravagant a person was, the more cautious they were. People who were willing to spend money would be more willing to take your life than anyone else. Not to mention that he had personally killed the Lord of Jia City. Since he couldn't persuade Warden Qian to do anything, the bald guard leader decided to behave himself in the future. Anyways, with the 1,000 Dao origin stones from Warden Qian, plus the 1,000 Dao origin stones that had been plundered, the profits were not small. When he sold it, it would be more than 1,000 Dao origin stones in the current market. It was a pity that he couldn't get Dao origin stones, so he would have to buy something else. He was calculating in his heart. The Business Alliance warehouse in Qingyang Town would operate normally in the future. Anyways, it would be as stingy as before. It would be hard to get 1,000 Dao origin stones. Why else would I say that the Four Seas Business Alliance is full of smart people? In the great illusionary realm, Chung Gungsheng's eyes narrowed so much that they were almost invisible. Wardens have their own intelligence. Guards have their own intelligence. Or else why would they, as the oldest business alliance in Qi, become weaker than the Jubao merchants after so many years of development? Jiang Wang looked at him suspiciously. What do you want to do? What do you mean, what do I want to do? When you narrow your eyes, you want to kill someone. Oh. Chung Gungsheng touched his wrinkled chin. I have to be more careful in the future. As for what? He looked at Jiang Wang and smiled. Military orders are like mountains. I can't say. Chapter 265. Chung Gungsheng really did not say anything. When it came to military matters, it was not something that could be joked about. However, he had already revealed all the information that he could. Those who knew would naturally understand. Qi would have a huge military operation in the near future, but they did not know who it would be directed at. It seemed like the assassination of Chu country's border general had touched some people's nerves. As the overlord of the East region, Qi's actions would definitely attract the attention of the world. The Jubao merchants that Chung Gungsheng mentioned had always been on the same level as the Four Seas Business Alliance. They were one of the top merchant organizations in the world. The Jubao merchants had a tacky name, but their actions were simple and straightforward. They always followed the principle of business is business and did not care about relationships. They only cared about the rules. One hand for the money, the other for the goods. Because they stank of money, many people in the upper echelons despised them. Among them, the famous scholar Su Fong was a typical example. He once scolded in front of many nobles after drinking. In my opinion, those who regard things as smelly can't compare to the gathering treasures chamber of commerce. Every time he saw someone from the Jubao merchants, he would purposely cover his nose to show that they stank. As a result, for a long period of time, the phrase stank of money was inseparable from the Jubao merchants. Regarding this, the president of the Jubao merchants only said one sentence: come for money, go for money. He did not reply. In the mainstream media, the Jubao merchants were obviously not as good as the Four Seas Business Alliance. The Four Seas Business Alliance had 9 honorary managers, and they were all members of the royal family. However, only those who truly held power understood that in terms of strength, the Jubao merchants were actually the head of the Qi Business Alliance. They had already left the Four Seas Business Alliance in the dust. For Jiang Wang, all of this could be put aside for now. Now that the plague was under control, what he wanted to do the most was to chase the mastermind behind this plague, which was the White Bone Path. Although the pig-faced person who spread the plague was dead, Jiang Wang had reason to believe that the White Bone Path had a backup plan. If not, what was the point of spreading the plague? Was it just to kill people? Perhaps a cult like the White Bone Path would indeed have the tendency to destroy the world. However, this plague alone was clearly not enough. In fact, Ruojia City had chosen to put the entire city under martial law the moment they found out about the plague. They had given a portion of their authority to Yang Ting, so the plague wouldn't have reached its current scale. Moreover, Jiang Wang believed that he already had a certain understanding of the White Bone sect and knew how terrifying this sect was. Regardless of whether it was the scale of his actions or the cruelty of his methods, there were few who could match him. Back when Little Forest Town was destroyed, Wei Qiuji had used the 3 cities Dao discussion to set up a trap to kill the White Bone sect disciples. But after that, the entire Maplewood City was destroyed. Never underestimate the White Bone Path. This was what Jiang Wang had been telling himself all the time. Jiang Wang was willing to pay the greatest attention to the target of his hatred. Only then would he have the opportunity to exact his revenge. Killing the pig-bone masked man was only the first step, an insignificant beginning. There were many people in the White Bone Path who could be killed. Many people were waiting for Chang Xiangxi's greetings. Therefore, the most important question for Jiang Wang to consider was, the White Bone Path had destroyed Maplewood City to refine the White Bone True Pill. Now, they were spreading the plague in Yang country. What was their purpose? If he could find a root cause, he might be able to thwart the White Bone Path scheme. Perhaps he still didn't have the strength to face the White Bone Path directly, but this was the eastern domain, thousands of miles away. This was Yang country. The White Bone Path definitely didn't have a deep foundation here, and they had just caused the plague, so they were naturally enemies of Yang Ting. As long as he took advantage of the situation, he might be able to cut off the White Bone Path's claws here. This kind of information that involved the deepest secrets of the White Bone Path was very difficult to obtain. Then, taking a step back, after the Pig Bone Masked Man, who would the White Bone Path send to Yang country to continue their plans? From the information revealed during the battle with the Pig Bone Masked Man, at least 4 of the 12 Bone Faces had died at Zhu Wei's hands. In addition to the inevitable casualties in the Battle of Maplewood City, as well as the Pig Bone Masked Man who had just died, there probably weren't many of the 12 Bone Faces still alive. Could this person be from the 12 Bone Faces? Or could it be Jiang Wang gripped his sword tightly? No matter who it was, after arranging everything in Qingyang town, he crossed Jia City alone with his sword and arrived at the Rizhao prefectural governor's office. After explaining his identity and purpose, he was warmly received. The doormen and maids were all polite. After entering the reception hall, the Rizhao prefectural governor even stood up to welcome him. This was already extremely good treatment. But as soon as they met, Jiang Wang felt greatly disappointed. It was because the white-haired old Rizhao prefectural governor's first sentence after greeting him was, "I wonder how much aid the Zhongnjia is prepared to give to our prefecture." It turned out that this kind of enthusiasm was because they saw him as the representative of the Zhongnjia and thought that the Zhongnjia was going to make a large donation to Rizhao prefectural. Of course, there was a precedent for this. As the sovereign state, she had already arranged for a ceremony to pray for the Sun Country. At the same time, she had also sent a team of medical practitioners to the Sun Country. She was also spontaneously donating to the Sun Country. In fact, many of the goods purchased by the Four Seas Business Alliance were half sold and half given, or even directly donated when they heard that they were going to help the Sun Country. This was due to the good relationship between the two countries and the Sun Country's loyalty. If Qi attacks, the Sun Country will obey. If Qi is in need of help, the Yang Kingdom will not hesitate to help. Many people remembered these words that appeared in the diplomatic letter of credence. Many Qi people saw the Sun Country as their own people. Logically speaking, it was reasonable for the Rizhao prefectural governor to show some concern for the people in the prefecture. But the problem was that even if the Zhongnjia wanted to donate to the Rizhao prefectural governor, it would not go through him. Handing it over to the Four Seas Business Alliance was undoubtedly a better choice for the Qi people. Of course, after what happened in Qingyang town, Jiang Wang knew that the Four Seas Business Alliance was not a good choice either. Jiang Wang could only see a bottomless greed in the Rizhao prefectural governor's eyes. He suppressed his displeasure and said, "Actually, I have another purpose for coming here." "Oh." The Rizhao prefectural governor leaned back in his chair. His eyes were even more gloomy and the wrinkles on his face were deeper. He said calmly, "What is it? Is it more important than disaster relief?" Jiang Wang is here to prevent the destruction of Rizhao Prefecture. Jiang Wang's words were shocking. Is this considered important? The Rizhao prefectural governor smiled mysteriously. He had probably seen too many alarmist people. "What do you mean by destruction?" "Prefectural governor, do you know the cause of this plague? It's nothing more than the two governors of Jiaqing and you, prefectural governor, deceiving their superiors and subordinates. Governor Jiaqing was killed by a righteous person." The Rizhao prefectural governor looked at Jiang Wang and said, "As for what happens to Governor Yu after that, we have to observe his words and investigate his actions." Jiang Wang could not believe that the governor of Yu prefectural governor was still in office. He only received a written warning from the prefectural governor. What was the difference between this and drinking 3 cups of wine as punishment? He killed Shi Munin and exposed the current situation of the plague in Jiaqing. Wasn't this the biggest meddling in other people's business? At least, the Rizhao prefectural governor's words showed his alienation. The gist of it was, since you're not here to talk about donations, then get lost. Don't get in the way of master's business. But at this time, Jiang Wang could only pretend that he did not understand. Lord Prefectural Governor, he said, the plague this time was spread by the white bone path. It was not a natural disaster, but a man-made one. But Governor Jiaqing and Governor Yu are internal problems, while the white bone sect is the cause. Does the prefectural governor know about this? Hearing this, the Rizhao prefectural governor completely lost interest. He immediately raised his teacup and signaled for the guest to leave. The prefecture has its own rules. This matter is not my responsibility. Chapter 266. If you, as the governor of Rizhao County, are not responsible for the outbreak of the plague, then who is responsible for it? Jiang Wang really wanted to put his head on the old man's neck and ask him that, but he could only endure it. There was no other reason other than that he was not powerful enough. The governor of Rizhao County was still the head of county. Regardless of power or status, he was not someone Jiang Wang could touch. He could only take advantage of the fact that the old man had not turned on him and said, based on the white bone sect style of doing things, the plague is probably just the beginning. If you do not take precautions, the consequences will be unimaginable. The whole county will be in danger. Tracing back the history of the white bone sect, they first appeared in Zhuang country. I grew up in Zhuang country, so I know them well. The governor frowned. You came beyond country as the representative of Zhongenjia, but you are from Zhuang country? Jiang Wang was stunned. He did not understand the man's point. I am from Zhuang country. That is why I know how scary the white bone sect is. However, the Rizhao prefectural governor stood up and left without saying a word. When the old man walked out of the hall without even looking back, Jiang Wang was shocked to find out that he was discriminated against. Just because he came from a small and remote country, the noble county chief of the Yang country didn't even bother to speak to him. Cheng Gengsheng, who was from one of the top families in Qi, did not discriminate against him because he was from Zhuang country. Su Xiangxian, who was from one of the top 4 academies, did not discriminate against him because he was from Zhuang country. He really wanted to ask, you are from a country that does not even have your own political views. What right do you have to discriminate against me? Jiang Wang opened his meridians at the age of 17. In just 1 year, he had crossed the traveling meridians and qi circulation. At the age of 18, he was already in the reaching heaven state and could open the gates of heaven and earth at any time. He had reserved the position of the inner house of remarkable powers and was qualified to fight for the title of the strongest reaching heaven state. He had defeated Zhang Wuyong and Cheng Gengsheng when he was in the reaching heaven state. How could someone like him be discriminated against because of his country of origin? It would be fine if the governor of Rizhao County was an ordinary old man, but he was the head of a county. How arrogant was he? How shallow was his vision? Even in a vassal state of Qi, they were even more arrogant than the people of Qi. Jiang Wang left angrily, without waiting for the people of the commandery manor to drive him away. There were only 3 prefectures in the entire Yang country, and the Rizhao prefectural governor was in charge of one of them. However, such a person was so shallow and greedy that it left Jiang Wang speechless. With a county governor like this, it was no wonder the Shi family was so ambitious. Even a pig wouldn't be willing to be under such an old man. He originally wanted to ignore this matter and quietly watch how the white bone path would stir up chaos in the world. When the time came, he wanted to see how this old man would deal with it. However, the white bone path was an evil cult that he was determined to eliminate. If he allowed it to grow, it would only increase the difficulty for him in the future. A moment of anger was not advisable. Moreover, this short-sighted old man might deserve to die, but the ones who would be buried with him were countless ordinary people. What crimes did the common people commit? Looking back, it seemed that he would not be able to get any support from Rizhao Prefecture. In the entire Yang country, Rizhao Prefecture had the most serious epidemic. In Rizhao Prefecture, other than Jia City, Yu Prefecture had the most serious epidemic. The source of the plague that broke out in Yu City was also Jia City. The person who first contracted the plague was surnamed Li. He opened a pie shop in Jia City. He returned to Yu Prefecture and brought the plague back. After that, he left Yang country and brought the plague to Rome country. This situation had already been investigated and announced by Jing Yi of Rome's leading light city. Jiang Wang was also aware of it. Oldly was also one of Hu Xiaoming's spies in Qingyang town. After Hu Xiaoming and Oldly died, no one knew about this anymore. Naturally, no one would have thought that Oldly was running all over the world to attract Jiang Wang's attention. Even Jiang Wang himself did not think of this. However, it did not stop him from making Yu Prefecture his next destination. He was very sure that there were still people from the White Bone Path active in Yang country. That person's location should be where the epidemic was the most serious. Therefore, he would go wherever the epidemic was the most serious. Wu Yingquan was a prison head in Yu Prefecture. He was in charge of 4 prison guards. His job was actually very easy. If there was any danger, the constables and city guards would take care of it. If there was danger that they could not handle, they would not be able to enter the prison. Moreover, there weren't any outstanding heroes in the entire Qi Kingdom's sphere of influence. Yang country was also included. Therefore, things like breaking out of prison were as far away as legends. The power of the government was absolute. There were no forces that could compete with them. If you accidentally got into trouble, you had no other choice but to admit defeat. Of course, there was a lot of money in prison. Although there were no truly extravagant people trapped in the prison cell, there was no one who could truly hide. In a harsh place like prison, there were still many people who were willing to give up so that they could suffer less. However, there were always exceptions. There were also those who were stubborn and had stubborn bones. Like the old man who had just entered prison. He looked like a rich scholar. His crime was not very clear. It was a mess of things like creating rumors and causing trouble. Perhaps his family had used some money, but the city guards who had brought him and arranged a single room for him. Of course, there were rules in prison. Whether this arrangement could be implemented or not depended on whether these local tyrants agreed or not. The city guards had eaten filial piety. Shouldn't the prison masters in the prison also eat filial piety? Based on Wu Yinchuan's experience, these people were stubborn because they had not really suffered. After a few hints, Wu Yingquan instructed and threw him into the large prison cell where the serious criminals were locked up. There was a name for this in prison. It was called the Earth Room. It was a place where the prisoners in prison would turn pale when they heard it. The fiercest group of prisoners in the entire prison gathered here. Even a tiger would be trained to be a dog if it went in. As for the Heaven Room, where the death row prisoners were locked up, Wu Yingquan still did not dare to send him in. This was because people often died there, and this rich scholar was registered with the city guards. If he had to be interrogated in the future, it would be very troublesome if he died. He drank too much the night before and slept until noon the next day. Wu Yingquan slapped his forehead and thought to himself, "Oh no." It was not that he was afraid of being late or anything. Who would care about that in prison? He was also a prison head. It was not a problem for him to be late and leave early. What he was worried about was that if he was late, the rich scholar would not be able to withstand the torture and die in the Earth Room. Not to mention that the silver he had high hopes for was gone. If the city guards came back, it would be terrible enough. Wu Yingquan almost jogged all the way and rushed to the prison. He went straight to the Earth Room. Contrary to his expectations, the prison cell was peaceful. The ferocious criminals were all sitting or lying down, staring blankly, or catching lice. Occasionally, there were people who chatted, but they all lowered their voices, as if they were afraid of disturbing someone. Wu Yingquan poked his head in and looked around. The person sleeping on the second bed on the left, that was the only bed in this large prison cell that was facing the vent and was considered cool. Who else could it be but the rich scholar? Chapter 267. The scene in front of Wu Yingquan was very unfamiliar to him. He even took a few steps back and checked the location of the cell again and again before he was finally sure that he had not come to the wrong place. This was really the Earth-class private room that made people's expressions change when they heard it in the prison, and not some model prison cell used to fool the superiors. Wu Yingquan suspected that the person had been beaten to death and that this group of rotten people had deliberately covered up the fact that he was sleeping to avoid punishment. He was about to go out and summon the other prison guards. He really did not dare to go in alone. When he turned his head, the prison guard Old Ding walked over with something. When he got closer, he saw that he was carrying a food plate. There was a roasted chicken, 2 steamed buns, and even a pot of wine. "Good for you, Old Ding." Wu Yingquan reached out to grab the chicken leg. "Who is this? Why are you so relaxed? You must have rolled a lot of oil, right?" In the outside world, Lao Feng meant comfortable. In prison, it meant willing to spend money. Rolling oil was also a prison slang that meant accepting bribes. Old Ding carried the food plate to the side and avoided Wu Yingquan's hand. He smiled and said, "Boss, I'll make something for Mr. Qin to eat." Wu Yingquan's hand stopped halfway, and he felt a little unhappy. He was usually very kind to the prison guards under him and allowed them to roll oil in private. He was not like the other prison guards who only cared about themselves. Now that he saw it, it was reasonable to ask for a share of the profits. But this Old Ding was actually so untactful. "You won't even let me eat a chicken leg?" he asked with a gloomy face. The cell was too dark, so Old Ding did not notice Wu Yingquan's expression. He only smiled and said, "Mr. Qin is someone who loves cleanliness. If you touch it, you might not eat it. I didn't pay for this meal." It was the group of people in the private room who gathered the money. "There wasn't enough money to buy the wine, so I added some. I'll treat you to another meal later." Wu Yingquan was even more surprised and even forgot to continue being angry. The rotten people in the private room were all thick-skinned. Even if they were cut by a knife, they would not be willing to spit out half a knife. That was why they were all stuffed into the earth room. Asking them to gather money to buy wine and food was like squeezing oil out of stone. "What, Mr. Qin?" He couldn't help but ask. "I only found out this morning. The criminal who was sent in yesterday was Curator Qin of Serene Medical Center in the west of the city, the son who inherited old Master Qin's legacy." "Is he old Mr. Qin's son?" Wu Yingquan's eyes widened. Old Mr. Qin was a figure that everyone in Yu City knew. It was not only because his medical skills were superb and he could heal the wounded and save the dying. It was also because of his benevolence as a doctor. Renexien didn't mean that he didn't charge money. In fact, old Mr. Qin's fee was extremely high. Ordinary people couldn't afford to hire him at all. However, his Serene Medical Center would treat a large number of poor people who had no money to seek medical treatment every year. Every time there was a disaster in Yu City or a place that was attacked by vicious beasts, Serene Medical Center will be the first to donate. Not to mention helping orphans, giving porridge to beggars, and asking for medicine. Old Mr. Qin's high consultation fees were all used in these areas. Many of his disciples and grand-disciples were homeless orphans. Not only did he provide for their livelihood, but he also taught them skills so that they could stand on their own. In short, in Yu City, there might be people who hadn't seen old Mr. Qin, but there was no one who hadn't heard of him. Wu Yingquan was no exception. That's right. Old Ding was a little excited. "The reason why my father can live until now is all because of old Mr. Qin." Looking at this old fox's rare excitement, Wu Yingquan suddenly understood why the Earth-class private room was so harmonious now. He subconsciously turned his body to the side and let Old Ding walk over. Old Ding handed the plate of food into the cell through the small window and cursed. "Hold it steady, you rotten eggs." The person inside didn't mind at all. He chuckled and took the plate of food. "It smells so good. Damn it, how long has it been since I ate chicken? Quick, 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 let me smell it too." A group of boorish rascals walked to the bed where Qin Yinmin was sleeping soundly. Their voices became gentle. "Mr. Qin? Mr. Qin? Get up and eat." Qin Yinmin got up and sat on the bed. Wu Yingquan saw that there was a bruise at the corner of his eye. It seemed that he had suffered when he first entered the cell. The man next to him placed the plate of food in his hand. "Eat, Mr. Qin." The sound of saliva being swallowed could be heard in the room. Wu Yingquan couldn't help but think, to be treated so sincerely by a group of prisoners who definitely couldn't be considered good people. Just how high of a reputation did he have? Qin Yinmin was in his 50s. Because he took good care of himself, Although there was a slight layer of frost on his hair, his face didn't look old. However, at this moment, his expression was haggard. He didn't touch the roasted chicken, only tearing the white bread into strips and eating it bite by bite. It didn't look like he was eating, but more like a machine forcing himself to do something. If you don't want to eat, why are you eating? Wu Yingquan asked from outside the cell. Qin Yimin didn't look at who asked the question. He didn't even turn his head. He only said, I want to live. Old Mr. Qin's son shouldn't be breaking the law. Wu Yingquan couldn't help but ask, why did you come in here? The person who handed you over said all kinds of nonsense. I don't understand. This time, Qin Yimin turned his head to look at him for a while, his eyes full of grief. You're not that bad. I don't want to harm you. Wu Yingquan tactfully shut his mouth. After being in prison for so many years, he understood all too well that it was best not to know things that he shouldn't know. Qin Yimin clearly had such a thing on his back. Therefore, even if he had such a respected father, he still came here. Thinking of this, Wu Yingquan asked again, do you need me to pass on a message to old Mr. Qin? In his opinion, old Mr. Qin's son was naturally worth a trip. However, as soon as he said this, Qin Yimin, who had an otherworldly aura even in a place like a prison, suddenly put down the plate of food and began to wail loudly. A man in his 50s cried like a child. Wu Yingquan left the prison in a daze and followed Old Ding to the west of the city. Old Mr. Qin was 90 years old and could be considered to have lived a long life. Birth, old age, illness, and death were human nature. The people of Yu City should have long been mentally prepared for his departure. However, when this day really came, it was still so difficult to accept. The reason why Wu Yingquan was in a daze was that he knew very well that he couldn't be considered a good person. However, at the same time, he also knew very well that a pure, good person like old Mr. Qin was very rare in the past, and there would be even fewer in the future. Even if he was a bad person, he didn't want to live in a world full of bad people. When Wu Yingquan and Old Ding walked to the west of the city near Serene Medical Hall, they stopped. The entire long street was filled with wreaths, and the ground was covered with white sacrificial flowers. However, there weren't many people. With old Mr. Qin's current status, there should be endless traffic outside the door. Why was there only sacrificial flowers on the street? Look at that freaky face. Wu Yingquan was full of doubts as he walked along the long street with Old Ding until they arrived in front of Serene Medical Hall. They saw that the door was tightly shut, and there was a banner hanging at the door. There's an infectious disease inside, declining the sacrifice. There was only this sentence and nothing else. It was accompanied by an empty long street, which was covered in white mourning. Chapter 268. What was honor? A jade belt around the waist. A high position and power? A warehouse full of gold and silver, rich in a region? What was glory? The most luxurious coffin, the most extravagant tomb? High officials and dignitaries, endless condolences. Funeral was like a happy occasion, and there was a long line of carriages in front of the door. The living could die, but the dead could not live. In Wu Yingquan's memory, he had attended the funeral of the Deputy General of the City Guard's mother a few years ago. At that time, the Deputy General was the current Chief General of the City Guards of Yu City. At that time, he was already very popular. All the high officials and dignitaries of Yu City, including the rich and powerful families, had come. Their warden was only at the last seat at the funeral banquet. The few of them even gave gifts, but they didn't even get to enter the door. At that time, he felt that this was the ultimate glory, right? Even in his dreams, he hoped that when his mother died, there would be such a scene. In this way, when his mother died, she might be able to die in peace. Or he could say that this son was not born in vain. After so many years of working so hard to climb up, he was the grandson of the warden and treated the prison guards as brothers. He was diligent and responsible. After so many years, he was only a small prison head. He knew that being a small prison head was the limit. He didn't have a strong relationship outside, and he didn't have transcendent being cultivation inside. This was the most he could do in his life. his spirit dissipated. He began to muddle along and muddle along. The glory he gave his mother could only exist in his dreams. But until now, until today at this moment, looking at the sacrificial flowers that covered the long street, there were not many people here. He suddenly couldn't stop crying. He suddenly understood what the glory of grief was. Some people died, but he was still alive. He lived in everyone's hearts. No one wanted a person like old Master Cheen to die, because it had always been people like old Master Cheen who supported this world. It allowed people to see that there was still light in this world in the darkest and most desperate moment. Li Yang, the commander of the guards of Yu City's City Lord Mansion, didn't have any other merits other than being loyal to the City Lord. His combat strength was average, and his comprehension was also average. He often couldn't figure out the City Lord's thoughts. However, no matter what the City Lord said, he would do it without the slightest discount or slack off. Before his old father died, he had said to him, "In this life, you have no other merits other than loyalty. But as long as you maintain this, it will be enough." Li Yang remembered these words very clearly. The City Lord had thought of replacing him more than once, but the most private matters were always given to him first. This was the absolute trust that was exchanged for unconditional loyalty. Li Yang personally presided over the blockade of Serene Medical Hall. He dared to guarantee with his head that no one in Serene Medical Hall would be able to spread the news. Of course, it wasn't that easy at first, but after he killed 2 people with his own hands, the whole clinic quieted down. Qin Yinmin was the only one who kept trying to escape, climbing over a wall in the middle of the night, disguising himself as a night watchman. He wanted nothing more than to pretend that he didn't recognize him and just kill him. However, such a person could not be killed. Killing old Master Qin's son, especially when this son had such a good reputation, would be criticized by the people. Li Yang thought about it for a while, but he couldn't come up with a good idea. Left with no other choice, he was sent to prison. In the prison, there was no wall to climb over, right? He was just a pile of old bones. Wasn't he afraid of spraining his back? In order to avoid tarnishing the City Lord's reputation, he even went to another place and specifically asked the city guards to do this. Today, Rhone Country's condemnation of Yang Country had been made public to the eastern region. Jia City also officially announced the plague situation and notified the whole country. The City Lord of Yu City also received a stern warning from the county government and finally decided to announce the true situation facing the city. Li Yang thought that he could finally get rid of Qin Yinmin, this hot potato, and that there was no need to seal the news. However, at this time, he received an order from the City Lord to kill Qin Yinmin immediately. He didn't quite understand the City Lord's thoughts, but whatever the City Lord said, he would do. He didn't need to care whether he was willing or not, because he didn't need to have his own will. What made Li Yang feel inconceivable was that in such a heavily guarded prison, an old man who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken actually escaped. The day before he went to the prison to kill someone, there was chaos in the prison. In the Yu City prison, which had been peaceful for decades, there was a riot in the infamous Earth private room. Dozens of felons held prison guards hostage, broke open the cell doors, and fled in all directions, causing trouble and turning the entire prison into a mess. The warden used his extraordinary strength to personally suppress this riot. When he counted, he realized that other than the 2 felons who were killed on the spot, none of the prisoners had escaped. Only Qin Yinmin was missing. It was as if the prisoners risked their lives to start a riot just to send this person out. Li Yang felt incredulous, not because this matter was brilliant. It was because it was too meaningless. This group of rotten people in the prison spent so much effort to do a meaningless thing. Even he, who had always been scolded as an idiot by the City Lord, found it laughable. The matter itself wasn't difficult to investigate. Other than all the felons in the Earth-rank private room, there were also 2 people from the prison who were involved in this matter. One of the prison guards was surnamed Ding, and the other was surnamed Wu. Now, they were both stripped of their clothes and thrown into the cells. Whether they were killed or tortured, they were all things that happened later. Qin Yinmin, who had already escaped from the prison, wasn't difficult to track down. An ordinary person who hadn't reached the transcendent realm, and an old man in his 50s, no matter how good his legs were. Where could he escape to? It just so happened that Yu City had already begun to seal off all places, and the entire city was under martial law. Not to mention a fugitive. Even a proper citizen wouldn't be able to go too far. As the commander of the city Lord's Mansion's guards, Li Yong naturally could pass through the entire territory of Yu City without any hindrance. At this time, the situation that he truly couldn't understand arrived. He discovered that as a transcendent realm cultivator, with the orders of the city lord of Yu City, the secret support of the entire city's official forces, and a large amount of manpower, he actually couldn't catch Qin Yinmin. He was like a weak but agile fly. Li Yong could feel that he was circling around him, but he couldn't see where he was and couldn't catch him. He felt that there was an invisible force faintly resisting his search, but he couldn't find what that force was. In the entire territory of Yu City, what force could resist the city lord mansion? How is this possible? After a long time, without success, the city lord of Yu City flew into a rage. He simply turned the secret capture into a public arrest, mobilizing several of Yu City's most famous transcendent realm constables to participate in the pursuit. One of the constables had worked for a blue metal constable in Qi City when he was young, and his methods were shrewd and ruthless. Just a small demonstration of his skills allowed Li Yong to see the power of these cultivators who specialized in torture. It was also at this time that he realized that the ones who had been hindering him from secretly capturing Qin Yinmin weren't some organization, but those peddlers, those shop owners, the waiters of the restaurant. They were all ordinary people. They spontaneously hid Qin Yinmin's tracks, deliberately leading Li Yong and the others in the wrong direction. In Li Yang's limited experience, he had never seen this before. Among these ordinary people, there wasn't a single person who could pose a threat to him. But for some reason, he felt a chill run down his spine and his heart turned cold. Fortunately, his fear didn't need to be noticed because he didn't need to have his own will. Fortunately, Qin Yinmin's tracks had already been revealed. Under the methods of the extraordinary constables, a mere Qin Yinmin had nowhere to hide. When Li Yong followed the two extraordinary constables to catch up to Qin Yinmin, he discovered that he had unknowingly escaped to the border of Yu City. Under the pursuit of the extraordinary constables, he had almost escaped from this place. For an ordinary 50-year-old man, this was truly an inconceivable matter. It could be called a miracle created by ordinary people, but it was still a bit off. Sometimes, a single step was the difference between heaven and earth. Qin Yinmin, Li Yong loudly shouted at the old man's back. You can't escape. Follow me back to the city and await the city lord's punishment. The order he had received was to kill Qin Yinmin, but it wasn't convenient to do this in front of the extraordinary constables. In short, he had to capture him first. Qin Yinmin's body clearly shook. He turned around and looked back. His once well-maintained face was now frighteningly haggard, but his expression was stubborn, not dejected. You are also people of Yu City. He loudly said, don't you know what is happening in Yu City right now? Shouldn't someone take responsibility for this? Where is your conscience? Where is your humanity? The two extraordinary constables looked at each other in dismay. Of course they knew about the current outbreak of the plague, but the source of the disaster was in Jia City. Yu City was a neighboring city, so it was hard to avoid being infected. As for responsibility, they had heard that Jia City's city lord had already been killed, so what responsibility did he have to take? They guessed that there was a secret behind this matter. After all, for them to come out and chase after an ordinary person, it gave them a strange feeling. But in the end, it was only a guess. The two of them were experienced in the ways of the world, so they naturally wouldn't show it. Opening one eye and closing the other, the years were stable and the world was peaceful. Only Li Yong knew what Qin Yinmin was talking about. When the plague broke out in Yu City, old Mr. Qin had already investigated it. And the reason why it could still turn into a situation second only to Jia City's was because of Yu City's city lord's inaction. It was also because of this that he couldn't let this person speak anymore. He only leapt forward and shouted, "Stop trying to mislead people with your lies. If you have any grievances, then tell the yamen." An insignificant old man, wouldn't it be easy to capture him? At this time, a sheathed long sword blocked his path. This was a sword that could make people gasp in amazement. Its edge seemed to come out of the sheath. Even though it was still in the sheath, the sword was still humming. It was as if it couldn't restrain itself and wanted to let out a sound. A man like a sword, humming when there was injustice. I don't know why, but when I hear the words mislead people with lies, I feel very uncomfortable. A clear voice said. Chapter 269. Leon looked in the direction of the voice and saw a young man around 18 or 19 years old. He was wearing a black martial attire, his back was straight, and his sword was steady. When he stood on the ground, it was as if he had taken root. He should be an expert. His appearance could not be considered outstanding, but it could be said that he had delicate features. The most impressive thing about him was his eyes. They were very clean, bright, and filled with determination. Just these eyes alone were enough to make him look extraordinary. It was as if nothing could stop this young man. This person could only be Jiang Wang. "Who are you?" Li Yang said in a low voice. "You city's mayor is on duty to catch a fugitive. I advise you not to make a mistake." The two Transcendent Realm constables also walked behind him. No matter what happened, they naturally had to stand on Li Yang's side in front of outsiders. After leaving Rizhao City, he had just stepped into Yu City when he encountered such a situation. He did not want to meddle in other people's business, but after hearing a few words, he suddenly remembered Sun Ping. If he had asked a few more questions, would that young doctor not have died? Wouldn't he be able to find out the truth about the plague earlier? Wouldn't there be fewer deaths in Qingyang Town and Jia City? Therefore, he held his sword in front of him and blocked the old man, who was obviously just an ordinary person. He had no more trust in the government of Yang Country. Jiang Wang did not turn around, nor did he move away. He only asked, "Old man, what crime did you commit?" Qin Yinmin laughed bitterly behind him. "Perhaps it's the crime of speaking the truth, the crime of righteousness." Jiang Wang pursed his lips and said, "I've never heard of such a crime in the world." "Yes, but I have it in Yu City. Don't you think it strange?" "Young man, you should leave. The current Yu City is not worth shedding blood for." Jiang Wang still did not move. He only stared at Li Yang with a sharp gaze and said, "Since it's not worth it, why do you have to do this?" "I'm not doing this for Yu City's mayor, but for the people of Yu City. It's not for those officials and nobles who sit in their positions and do nothing. It's for the place where my ancestors have lived and fought for generations." "What do you want to do?" "Enter the capital and lodge a complaint." Qin Yinmin finally said something that made Li Yang and the two Transcendent constables tremble with fear. He said, "Before my father died, he said that he wanted His Majesty to know how his people were suffering." Jiang Wang sighed in his heart. "Do you know that what you're doing might be meaningless?" Jiang Wang thought to himself as he thought of the Rizhao prefecture government's attitude. There are some things that, regardless of whether they are meaningful or not. Qin Yinmin said, "My father is already dead, and I don't have many years left to live. If I don't do anything, I don't know how to meet him." "Young man, why do you tell me?" Finally, Liang could not bear to listen any longer. He let go of his fear of this strange cultivator and directly leaped forward with his claws. The eagle's cries soared through the clouds, and the wind from its claws broke through the air. When it was close to him, it turned into saber light and slashed down wildly. Knife claw chaotic cloak. Condensing blade force into claw force was a skill he was proud of. Even if the person in front of him had an overbearing aura and seemed difficult to deal with, he still wanted to try and kill him. However, he only saw a flash of sword light in the air, and a saber light that filled the air in front of him was cut into pieces. However, the sword did not stop, forcing him to retreat again and again until he finally returned to his original position. Jiang Wang stood there without turning his head. He only asked Qin Yinmin, "Old man, do you know where to go?" "Yes." "Then go. Don't turn back." Jiang Wang said, "Before I break my sword, you have no worries." Qin Yimin had lived for half his life. He knew very well that if he delayed, he would only increase the risk for Jiang Wang. Thus, he did not say a word. He gathered all his remaining strength and ran away. Jiang Wang faced Li Yang and the two transcendent constables. He stood in the middle of the road and said, "I don't want to go back on my words. If you still want to pursue him, then I will have to kill you." His voice was very calm, but because of the sword that forced Li Yang to retreat, there was an unquestionable and irreversible aura in it. At the very least, the three transcendent cultivators of Yu City knew very well that they were far from being this youth's match. "Fellow Taoist," Li Yang braced himself and said, "the person you let go is truly a sinner. You must not only listen to his side of the story." "Then what crime did he commit?" "This." Li Yang was momentarily stunned. The two transcendent constables looked at each other and could not help but curse in their hearts. No wonder the city lord always called him an idiot. Could it be that he did not come up with an excuse before deceiving people? He was actually stumped by a casual question. Li Yang held back for a long time before changing his words. "What do you want for you to wash your hands of this matter?" Qin Yinmin had already run further and further away. Jiang Wang was not in a hurry to leave. He only leisurely said, "What I said, could it be that I will swallow it back?" "Just who are you?" Li Yang asked again. Asking this question at this time was a threat to settle scores later. Relying on you city lord, to a certain extent, represented the power of the entire Yang country. He naturally had the confidence to do so. Jiang Wang coldly snorted, "I am Zhang Linchuan." He had even killed Jia city lord, so of course he was not afraid of you city lord. However, he wanted to avoid as much trouble as possible. There was no need for him to announce his name and sit at home waiting for the other party to take revenge. "Good, Zhang Linchuan, I will remember this." Li Yang hurriedly left behind a ruthless sentence and left with the two transcendent constables. It was obvious that he could not win, so it was better not to throw his life away. Even if he did, it would be useless. At this point, it was better to report to the city lord as soon as possible. If that Qin Weimin really went to lodge a complaint, the city lord should prepare a response in advance. As for this Zhang Linchuan, after leaving Jiang Wang for a long time, Li Yang angrily said, "Old song, you are experienced and knowledgeable. Who is this Zhang Linchuan? I have never heard of him." Constable Song pondered for a moment. He is so strong at such a young age. Could he be someone from a family in Qi? Li Yang paused for a moment. There is no famous family in Qi with the surname Zhang. Qi is so big. There must be a few families that are not famous, but are very powerful. The other constable shrunk his head and did not want to cause trouble. "You should go back and ask the city lord for instructions. Let's see what Qin Weimin can do." "Yeah, maybe the city lord knows who Zhang Linchuan is," Constable Song said. Although he said that, he wanted to let the city lord worry about it himself. He did not want to get involved. Experienced people knew that young geniuses were not to be messed with. These people were usually arrogant and looked down on everyone. They did not know when to stop. However, there were always a bunch of people behind them who were waiting to clean up their mess. Small characters like them could not afford to mess with them. They rushed to the city in a hurry, their mouths full of complaints. Suddenly, they heard the sound of a bell. Ding ling ling, ding ling ling. In Li Yang's sight, the first thing he saw was a small bell that was hanging on a green rope. It was strange. He clearly heard the sound of the bell, but at this moment, he clearly felt that the bell did not make any sound. Instead, the sound of the bell seemed to come from the bottom of his heart. Was it an illusion? He looked up along the green rope. His hand that was tied with the rope was hidden in his sleeve. Further up, a cloak that covered the person was hanging down. Then, from under the cloak, there was a thin, female voice. "I seem to hear you talking about Zhang Linchuan." This voice was cold, slippery, and dangerous, just like a poisonous snake. "Did the Lord Messenger come here in person?" Chapter 270. Jiang Wang secretly followed Qin Yinmin for a while. Seeing that they were far away from Yu City and that there were no other dangers, he stopped. He would let this old man walk the path of a hero himself. He respected Qin Yimin's choice, but in reality, he didn't have much confidence in Qin Yimin's trip. People often had unrealistic fantasies about wise rulers and righteous masters. They always felt that the darkness in front of them was because the wise ruler hadn't had time to look here, but they never thought about where the soil that bred evil came from or who cultivated it. He didn't regret saving Qin Yinmin, but his plan to use the power of U City's City Lord Manor to track down the White Bone Path demon was obviously ruined. It was funny. He was clearly trying to save the people of this area, but he offended the officials of 2 cities in succession. I originally gave my heart to the moon, but the moon shines on the ditch. Jiang Wang estimated that it was impossible for him to quickly find the White Bone Path demon, so he could only rely on himself to slowly find him. This was a somewhat depressing thought, but his clothes were rustling in the wind. Someone was approaching quickly. Jiang Wang didn't stop, only holding his sword tightly. I didn't know that the emissary had arrived in this area. This subordinate was impolite for not greeting you earlier. A female voice came from afar and quickly fell behind him. Jiang Wang quickly turned around and faced the person. The first thing that caught his attention was the small bell in the person's hand. It looked simple and ordinary, only 2 fingers wide and 2 fingers long, but it made no sound when it was shaken, giving off a strange feeling. "You're not the emissary?" The person holding the bell seemed to be stunned. Her voice came from under the thick cloak, like a snake slithering on the ground. After hearing the news about Zhang Linchuan, the snake-faced person's initial thought was to see what Zhang Linchuan was doing in Yang country. According to the original plan, the Holy Lord should be the one to come and clean up the mess. She was now nominally on the Holy Lady's side, so she couldn't ignore Zhang Linchuan's actions. But the person in front of her was the same as the 3 U City cultivators. He was young, wearing a simple black martial outfit, had half-long hair, and had a long sword. Except it wasn't Zhang Linchuan. She had thought that Zhang Linchuan had taken off his mask and changed his outfit, hoping to do something with the old man surnamed Qin. But now it seemed that this was not the case. This man was not Zhang Linchuan at all. If he wasn't Zhang Linchuan, how did he know Zhang Linchuan's name? Did they have the same name? Or the snake-faced man's mind raced, and he caught on to the truth in an instant. "Did you kill Pigface?" In this place, only the man from Zhuang who had killed the pigskin man might know Zhang Linchuan's name. Without waiting for Jiang Wang to reply, she turned around and flew away. To be able to kill Pigface, no matter what method he used, it was enough to show how powerful he was. She might not be able to keep her life in the fight, so run. She had been following Zhang Linchuan's trail, but she did not expect to meet the person she least wanted to meet in the Yang Kingdom. He had intended to escape from danger, but had unexpectedly bumped into it. In a split second, he burst forth with all his strength and rushed into the distance in the blink of an eye. Jiang Wang was also stunned for a moment. He didn't know what emissary this person was talking about. However, after that person fled at full speed without saying a word, his gaze immediately turned cold. Found it. He had searched high and low for it, only to find it by chance. This aura was exactly the same. The 12 Divine Bone Manifestation's mystic technique. This person was one of the 12 white bone faces of the White Bone Path. While his thoughts were still spinning, he had already rushed out. His body was wrapped in purple aura, and he was riding on the sword light. Tao essence surged out of the Tongtian Palace, surging in his blood. Jiang Wang was like a gust of wind sweeping across the earth, stirring up countless fallen leaves and dust. Because he had not opened the heaven and earth door, he could not walk in the air. Every time he touched the ground, there would be a loud explosion, and a shallow pit would be formed. If someone looked down from the sky, they would see a rising smoke dragon that was still rapidly spreading forward. This speed was purely driven by his vigorous Tao essence, and it had already reached Jiang Wang's current limit. However, the snake-faced man still fled further and further away, gradually disappearing from sight. Although he now had the battle prowess to kill a soaring dragon realm cultivator, he had not crossed the heaven and earth door in essence, and could not compare to a soaring dragon realm cultivator's speed. He could entangle his opponent in an intense battle, but against a soaring dragon realm cultivator who had begun to flee from afar, there was indeed not much he could do. However, Jiang Wang did not give up just like that. As he ran, he had already formed a hand seal to complete the Dao technique recollection. In the brief contact just now, he had already captured a wisp of the fleeing white-skinned man's aura, and it was precisely for this moment. With the recollection guiding him, Jiang Wang ignored everything else and chased with all his might. Judging from the white-skinned man's reaction, if he let her escape this time, she would probably never appear in front of Jiang Wang again. It was very likely that this was the only time he would have a chance to make her stay. Whether it was for the people of the Yang Kingdom who were suffering from the plague, or for Jiang Wang himself, he would not let her go. This was a very long chase. The two of them chased each other through the entire region of Yu City, all the way to Jia City, and then to Ning City. Along the way, they attracted the attention of countless people, but no one came to cause trouble. In terms of absolute speed, the snake-skin man was of course faster. However, she could not match up to Jiang Wang's relentless pursuit. As long as she stopped for a moment, she would quickly discover Jiang Wang's approaching figure, and she would have no choice but to immediately flee again. Every time Jiang Wang lost sight of his target, he would immediately lock onto the direction again with the recollection and continue the chase. The two of them passed through more than half of Rizhao Commandery, took a big detour, and entered Redtail Commandery. The snake-skinned man who was fleeing in front of them did not dare to enter Qi City no matter what. If she was stopped, it was very likely that she would be killed. In fact, this was also the reason why Jiang Wang continued the chase without any scruples. For heretical cults like the White Bones sect, their followers were like rats crossing the street, hated by everyone. Wherever the sun shone, the pursuit of evil cultists was supported and encouraged. The ones who should be afraid were the rats, and never the people chasing the rats. After passing through more than half of Rizhao Commandery and taking a big detour into Redtail Commandery, the two of them had crossed almost half of the Yang Kingdom. If they had hurried on a normal journey, it would have taken them more than half a month. The two of them fled at top speed, but it still took them a whole 3 days and 3 nights. At this point, the snakeskin man's mood was very gloomy. Although they had not officially fought, she already understood why this person could kill Pig Face. Just such a vast reserve of Dao energy was enough to shock her. Compared to heaven-reaching realm practitioners, soaring dragon realm practitioners needed a large amount of Dao energy to support the heaven and earth isolated island. Before they completely cleared the mist of obscurity and saw through the ocean of torso, the amount of Dao energy they could use would not increase substantially. Although in theory, Jiang Wang's reserve of Dao energy was more than that of Heaven Ascension practitioners, he had opened his meridians with the best meridian unlocking elixir. The Tongtian Palace was tall and majestic, and it had the heavenly cycle star formation as its foundation. The 9 galaxies revolved, and its Dao energy reserve was far greater than that of other practitioners in the same realm. It was impossible to shake him off completely. Along the way, the snakeskin man did not dare to pass through cities. She passed through mountains and ridges. No matter how powerful and terrifying the white bone path was under the sun, her identity was at a disadvantage. If possible, she even wanted to escape all the way back to the underground palace where the white bone path's headquarters was. But that was just her imagination. There was no need to wait that long. If this desperate pursuit continued for 2 more days, her Dao energy would be exhausted, and she would have to draw the Dao energy from the heaven and earth isolated island. She did not want to endure the pain of the fog returning. She did not know how long Jiang Wang could last, but she did not want to gamble. When she really reached her limit, she was afraid she would not have the strength to fight anymore. At that time, she was afraid she would be the first soaring dragon practitioner to die trying to escape. No matter how much she cherished her life, she did not want this title. So she stopped and began to take the time to regulate her breath. Then she would fight with her life, since she could not escape. Chapter 271. Bang, bang, bang. The sound was almost constant. The snake-faced woman had heard it many times during the escape. She knew that it was the sound of the young man stepping on the ground. It was the sound of the body colliding with the ground. It was the sound of pure strength hitting the ground. The ground was the drum, and the feet were the mallet. Every step was a sound, and it never stopped. Hearing this sound meant that the young man was approaching again. His feet made small pits on the ground of Yang country, connecting to form a long path that extended from the border of Yu City in Rizhao County to Redtail County. The snake-faced woman had to admit that this was a difficult path. Jiang Wang's persistence moved her. The hatred in his persistence made her even more afraid. She refused to let anyone see her fear, so she stood up. Jiang Wang's current condition was not good, but it was not too bad either. Along the way, they had been chasing him. Although he had used up a lot of Dao energy, his 9 galaxies and the star twining spirit snake could not supply it. However, the continuous circulation of the 4 spirits body tempering technique had strengthened his body. He had never tempered his body in such a way. Compared to swordsmanship and Dao techniques, he had spent the least effort on his body. This was because he had planned his own combat system. He once had the illusion that he could run until the end of time. In fact, he would only run to his death. Now that he had stopped here, his physical strength and Dao energy were greatly depleted. He was not in his best condition, but he was still confident that he could defeat his opponent. This confidence was not gained overnight. It was obtained after experiencing one battle after another and welcoming one victory after another. The other party turned and ran after confirming that he was the one who killed the Pigbone Man. This meant that the other party was definitely not stronger than the Pigbone Man. Jiang Wang, on the other hand, had never stopped working hard, nor had he stopped improving. After killing Shi Munin, Jiang Wang was stronger than Jiang Wang when he killed the Pigbone Man. Just as Jiang Wang leaped out of the forest and saw the woman in the bamboo hat on the open ground stand up, he heard the sound of a bell. He quickly sensed it. This sound did not enter his ears, but it came from his heart. He felt a little dizzy, and his forehead was burning. His body was itchy. He wanted to scratch his bloody skin. However, this feeling only lasted for an indiscernible moment. The illusory images of the 4 spirits on the surface of his body intersected, and his beer instantly became clear. He raised his sword. Ding! It was a very soft sound. It was the snake bone face's palm blade that was about to reach his face. However, at the critical moment, it was blocked by Chang Xiangxi. The snake bone-faced man took small steps forward, his palm chopping forward again. Jiangxi's sword was blocked and bent backwards. At the same time, Jiang Wang raised his knee to push forward. The snake bone-faced man's palm power changed from a vertical saber to a horizontal push. One palm pressed against Jiang Wang's sword. The other hand hooked onto Jiang Wang's tendon and gently shook the bell again. When the plague bell rings, the plague spreads. Of course, a normal plague could only kill ordinary people, but under the full power of the snakeskin, it could already harm transcendental cultivators. When the snake-faced man pushed with his palm, Jiang Wang took advantage of the momentum and floated backwards. As he retreated, his hands, which had not been idle all this time, completed the incantation. The sea of flowers had already spread out. Jiang Wang returned to the state of being disturbed by the plague, and in front of the snake-faced man, a beautiful scene of blooming flowers appeared. Both sides were confused, but the 4 spirits body-refining technique and the physical body forged by the clear sky goat once again bought Jiang Wang time. Before the snake-faced man could see the sea of flowers, he first broke free from the plague and leaped forward. The biting, cold, murderous intent and the stirring sound of the wind provided the snake-faced man's position. She immediately moved her fingertips, and the plague spread again. At the same time, Jiang Wang's mind stirred, and the binding tiger was activated. The plague bell shook. The Taoist technique, binding tiger. The 2 people, who were fiercely fighting, strangely paused for a moment. It was as if time and space had stopped, and then moved again. The snake-faced man's cherry lips opened, and her fragrant tongue flicked out slightly. A cold light shot out, instantly cutting open the cloak covering her face and stabbing straight at Jiang Wang. It was the manifestation of the white bone dharma, the snake-tongue sword. The cloak was her bush, and the sword was her fangs. This was her trump card. However, the snake-tongue sword stabbed empty air. Jiang Wang appeared on her side, where half of his body overlapped with hers. He directly raised his long sword, and the cold light shot out, cutting off her tongue. This was already the third time Jiang Wang was disturbed by the plague. His body had already gotten used to it, and it was no longer as difficult as it was at the beginning. He reacted half a breath in advance. The snake-faced man's position was only misled by the sea of flowers. Ugh. The snake-faced man leaned back in pain, but because her tongue was cut off, she couldn't even make a complete scream. Jiang Wang didn't hesitate. He punched her abdomen, and his Taoist essence surged. He found the position where the dragon of Taoist veins formed by her Tongtian palace was circling. Then he accurately pierced his sword and destroyed her Tongtian palace. After the dragon of Taoist veins, the Tongtian palace had already moved. It no longer stopped in the sea of vertebrae, but roamed in the sea of torso. It wasn't until this moment that a thin and sharp sword fell behind Jiang Wang. It turned out that although the snake-faced man's tongue was cut off, and she was in great pain, the pain she showed was both to vent and to hide the fact that the snake-tongue sword had turned back to stab. However, Jiang Wang was faster and more decisive than she was. He didn't even leave her a chance. Only when the dust had settled did Jiang Wang put his sword back into its sheath. He quietly watched the snake-faced man writhing in pain on the muddy ground. Her cloak had been cut off by herself, and her gorgeous face was revealed to the world. Her figure was beautiful like a mountain range. She writhed and screamed like a beautiful snake. Although her mouth was full of blood and she was in great pain, there was a cruel beauty to her. Jiang Wang waited until she was in so much pain that she didn't have the strength to scream or struggle. Then he squatted in front of her and said, "Now let's talk." The snake-faced man looked at him with resentful eyes. Jiang Wang patted his forehead as if he suddenly realized something. "I'm sorry. You screamed so miserably that I forgot for a moment that you can't talk anymore." The snake-faced man mustered all her remaining strength to pounce at him, as if she wanted to bite him. However, Jiang Wang firmly held her in place with one finger. Jiang Wang's index finger pressed against her forehead, making her unable to move. "Don't look at me like that. No matter how miserable or painful you are, it won't make my heart soften. I've heard even more painful sounds. Those sounds appear in my dreams every time. That's why I don't dare to sleep." Jiang Wang shook his head gently and said self-deprecatingly, "Why am I telling you this? Let's make a deal." He pulled himself together and said, "You answer my questions, and I'll give you a quick death. You're a member of the White Bone Path. You should know better than me that there are many ways to make people wish they were dead. Even people like you wouldn't want to try, right? If you don't speak, I'll take it as a yes." Jiang Wang turned a blind eye to her hateful gaze and directly swept out an empty space with his palm. Then, he picked up her snake-letter sword and placed the hilt in her hand. "Don't try to kill yourself. You know you can't do it in front of me. Now I'll ask and you'll write. How about it?" The answer lies in the words. It's think thrice. It can give you time to think. You can choose to be more specific and truthful, or you can choose to lie to me. I know that some questions may make your death more painful, such as asking you about the White Bone Path's 12 divine manifestation secret techniques. So don't worry, I'll ask very appropriately. Of course, since I'm so considerate, you can't brush me off. As long as you brush me off once, I'll take it that you're unwilling to cooperate. He said softly, "Then the deal is canceled." He didn't say what would happen after the deal was canceled, because there was no need to repeat the consequences. A breeze blew past. The summer wind was also hot, but after passing through the branches and leaves of the forest, it somehow felt a little cold. Perhaps it was because they had walked too far. In this uninhabited wasteland, there were wild grass that grew wildly, and there were unknown summer flowers. There was a delicate and pretty young man who asked softly, and a gorgeous woman covered in blood. Chapter 272. If you refuse, you'll wish you were dead. If you lie to me, you'll wish you were dead. Even if you lie to me, you'll wish you were dead too. That was all Jiang Wang wanted to express. The snakeskin woman did look pitiful, but Jiang Wang wouldn't give her any sympathy. After confirming that his message had been conveyed, he asked directly, "Why did you mistake me for an emissary?" In his opinion, the reason why the snake-skinned woman mistook him for an emissary was probably because of the netherworld candle that was still living in the Tongtian Palace. Before leaving Maplewood City, Miaoyu said that the netherworld candle was something she couldn't find anywhere. It could be seen that it was very important to the White Bone Path. However, he still wanted to get confirmation from the snake-skinned woman. It would be best if he could understand the netherworld candle better. If possible, the snake-skinned woman wanted to eat his flesh, but she couldn't. Just as Jiang Wang said, she came from the White Bone Path and knew very well that there were many tortures worse than death. Although death was eternal nirvana, people already had no feelings and didn't need to feel. Especially for the White Bone Path, death was the only fairness in the world. Although she had a longing for life because of the death of the dog face, when it really came to an unavoidable moment, death wasn't something completely unacceptable. There were many ways to make a person beg for death. She herself had tried many times. The human tendon used to hang the plague Belzi Ling was one of her attempts. Of course, she was usually the one giving. At that time, she was indifferent and calm. She could observe carefully and discuss her observation of human nature or the so-called beauty of cruelty. However, once she realized that she might also encounter that kind of situation, she couldn't avoid fear. She had seen fear, so she understood it better. The snake-skinned woman was silent for a while. In the end, she grasped the snake-letter sword tightly and wrote in the open space, "The cultivators of Yu City said you were Zhang Linchuan." It was worth mentioning that she wrote in the Zhuang language. The Zhuang language was born out of the Jing language commonly used in Taoist countries, but formed its own characteristics. It was said that the Jing language evolved from the Taoist language and was the most honorable language in the world. Jing people called themselves. The so-called Taoist language was the pattern of the Great Tao. However, what worried Jiang Wang was the message the snake-skinned woman sent. How could there be such a coincidence in this world? He had just casually mentioned Zhang Linchuan, but the few cultivators from Yu City had already spread the news to the snake-faced man. Jiang Wang's second question was, "Who is the messenger you mentioned?" However, there was no need to ask this question. Zhang Linchuan was the bone messenger. He was ranked third on Maplewood City's Tao Honor Roll and a prominent figure in Maplewood City's Tao Academy. His true identity was actually a high-ranking member of the White Bone Path. At this moment, scenes of the past flashed through his mind. Back when he was investigating the White Bone Path demons in Tangxi Town, Zhang Linchuan had separated from him twice. Both times, he had been attacked by the White Bone Path. Connecting it to what Miaoyu said later, it was obvious that those 2 times were to test him. At that time, Zhang Linchuan, as the bone messenger, had been watching coldly from the side. Now that he thought about it, Jiang Wang still had lingering fears. If this person had thought about it at that time, he would probably have died on the spot. Then he thought about how long the White Bone Path had been preparing for the sacrifice of Maplewood City. People like Zhang Linchuan and Miaoyu were only one of the participants in such a major event. Jiang Wang could completely imagine how well prepared the White Bone Path had been. However, even with such meticulous preparations, so many talented people, and such a powerful and terrifying White Bone Path that had even attracted the White Bone God to cross over and take action, Zhuang Changxian, Du Ruhui, and Dong, and were still able to pull chestnuts out of the fire and pull the teeth out of the tiger's mouth. If the White Bone Path was an enemy, how could Dong, A, and the others not be? Jiang Wang thought for a moment and asked, "Who are the high-ranking members of the White Bone Path now?" This question was not enough to trigger the blood oath. Holy Lord, Second Elder Lu Yin, Bone Messenger Zhang Linchuan, Holy Maiden, Dragon Face, Monkey Face, Rabbit Face. The snake-faced person wrote one by one. Finally, he pointed at himself, indicating that he was the last high-ranking member of the White Bone Path. However, he was about to die, so he did not exist. When he fought with Ji Xian, the head of Qinghe County, Holy Maiden Miao Yu's strength was at the inner mansion level. Judging from the order of the snake-faced person, Lu Yin and Zhang Linchuan's strength were at least at or above the inner mansion level. Among the remaining 12 bone-faced people who were still alive, the dragon face should be the strongest and the snake-faced person the weakest. However, because of the little bell that created the plague, it was not easy for him to defeat the snake-faced person. The White Bone Path had been operating for so many years, so it was inevitable that they would have some unknown methods. None of these people could be underestimated. As for the Holy Lord, why did the White Bone Path have a Holy Lord? He had never heard of him fighting in the Battle of Maplewood City. If it was the White Bone God, hadn't he been defeated? Jiang Wang suddenly thought of his identity as the White Bone Taoist that Miao Yu had misunderstood. The real White Bone Taoist, was he the current Holy Lord of the White Bone Path? Especially since the snake-faced person did not mention the existence of the White Bone Taoist, but he must exist. Miao Yu had emphasized the word awakening. Had the White Bone Taoist completed his awakening? If he had not completely awakened, did he still need to do something? If he had completely awakened, did he still need to go through some changes to go from Taoist to Holy Lord? Did it have anything to do with the White Bone Path spreading the plague in the Yang Kingdom? He did not need to ask the snake-faced person this question, because it involved the existence of the Holy Lord. It must be the highest secret of the White Bone Path, and he would not be able to get the answer. Asking her was equivalent to killing her. You came to the Yang Kingdom to spread the plague? Jiang Wang asked. Yes, the snake-faced person wrote. Jiang Wang thought for a moment, then asked, where is Zhang Linchuan now? The snake-faced person did not move. Jiang Wang knew that there was no answer to this question, and he could not reveal it. What kind of secret place was he hiding in? It was very likely the White Bone Path's lair. Then where could he be? Putting these questions aside, Jiang Wang looked at the bell in her hand and asked, you spread the plague with this little bell? The snake-faced person bowed her head and wrote, yes. Because she lowered her head and let her hair down, Jiang Wang did not see the flash of joy in her eyes. But her hatred did not disappear. Of course, Jiang Wang did not expect her to have any good intentions. I have nothing else to ask, he said. This was a death notice. But the snake-faced person was still writing. She dragged her painful body, gritted her teeth, and wrote on the ground. When the age of white bones arrives, I will definitely treat you well. Jiang Wang gently patted her shoulder, grabbed the snake letter sword in her hand, turned it upside down, and slowly stabbed it into her heart. If there really is an age of white bones, Jiang Wang said, then you must find me. The snake letter sword stabbed to the end. Jiang Wang's voice sounded in her ear. Let me kill you again. The snake-faced person's body twitched violently a few times, then stopped. The fear and hatred in her eyes were extinguished. Chapter 273. The snake-tongue sword was refined using the 12 divine manifestations of white bone. Its main material was the white bone dharma idol of the snake bone face. It was as thin as a snake's tongue, and once Tao origin was poured into it, the sword could be softened. It was a fierce sword with many transformations. The snake bone face's corpse fell backward. Since Jiang Wang held the snake-tongue sword and did not move, the sword was slowly pulled out of her chest. Jiang Wang used her clothes to wipe away the blood on the snake-tongue sword. Then he took out the small box she kept in her bosom. When he was searching for the location of Tong Tian Palace, he conveniently found out about the box's existence. Jiang Wang had killed and robbed many times before he became a transcendent. There was nothing he could not do to the mountain bandits. He had to rely on the mountain bandits to survive. Even Zhao Ruqing and Fang Pengju were not willing to give them less money. Sometimes, they would even argue for a long time about who should get more. The small box with exquisite carvings was a storage box made by the Mahist family. The storage box's value lay in its material and secret formation patterns. Its value was determined by the size of the storage box. Jiang Wang was ashamed to say that he did not have many good things on hand that he needed to keep with him. That was why he did not think of buying one. Of course, his lack of money was also one of the reasons. The snake bone face's storage box was actually about 1 square meter in size. It was worth about 10,000 Dao origin stones, which was 100,000 Dao origin stones. It must be known that when Jiang Wuyong and Jiang Wang made their bet, they only added 10,000 Dao origin stones to the bet. This showed just how valuable a storage box was. The principle behind a storage box was not complicated. Many formations could reverse directions and shift space. It was not rare for them to expand or shrink space. It was not uncommon for a formation to trap a large army. Many factions had the ability to make storage boxes, and they did indeed use their own storage boxes. They refused to buy them from Mahis sect. However, Mahis sect's secret formation patterns for storage boxes were the best in terms of practicality and versatility. Secondly, Mahis sect monopolized most of the materials used to make storage boxes. So much so that the Mo family almost made the storage box one of their exclusive businesses. Furthermore, even if the cost of purchasing a storage box from Jet Black sect was so high, it was still much lower than the cost of making one. Opening the storage box carved with an unknown flower, the items inside were all placed in a miniature form. Once taken out, they would return to their original state. Upon closer inspection, most of the items were clothes, rouge, face powder, and a snake bone mask. What was truly valuable were the 2 primordial stones. One of them was only left with 3,300 Dao origin stones. It seemed that the white bone path was having a hard time under the pursuit of Zhuanghua. The innermost item was wrapped in a piece of jade silk brocade cloth. It should be the most precious item of the snake bone face. This kind of cloth could be used to grow animals, so its value is quite high. What kind of treasure would be wrapped in this cloth and stored away? Jiang Wang couldn't help but look forward to it. He carefully took it out and unfolded it. It was a broken dog bone mask. It was already damaged beyond recognition, so it was worthless to him. Thinking about it, even a notorious person like the White Bone Path with 12 faces would care about people and things. He always felt that the snake bone face didn't have a strong will to fight. He was probably scared out of his wits by someone. Now that he thought about it, it was probably when the owner of the dog bone mask died. Jiang Wang didn't lament too much. He wrapped the broken dog bone mask and the snake bone mask together with the jade silk brocade cloth and placed them on the corpse of the snake bone face. He then took out all the other items of the snake bone face and piled them on top of the corpse, leaving only the 2 primordial stones and the snake tongue sword in the storage box. Then, he threw down a flame flower and burned them, along with the corpse of the snake face cultivator. But at this time, when the flame was ignited, he suddenly noticed the small bell hanging on the snake bone face's hand. It was flickering with a gray light in the flame. It was strange. He had obviously been very concerned about this small bell. During the battle, it had indeed caused a lot of disturbance to him. He even asked about it when he was interrogating the snake bone face. But when he was counting the spoils of war, he actually ignored it. How could this be? Jiang Wang frowned and crooked his finger. A fire snake separated from the flame. It held the small bell in its mouth and brought it in front of him. He opened his palm. The fire snake dissipated and the bell fell. The small bell, with a blue vein on it, fell into his palm. It suddenly collapsed and exploded into countless gray dots of light. Who is it? A tired and stiff voice sounded from the gray dots of light. It was clearly a question, but it didn't have an inquiring tone. Instead, it seemed like it was stating something. An extreme sense of indifference mixed with a sense of fear that seemed to come from the bottom of his heart. Jiang Wang's hair stood on end. He didn't have time to think. His body reacted first, and he ran away. He chased after the snake bone face into the forest and out of the forest at his fastest speed. He ran for a full hour until the sense of fear subsided. Only then did he stop. At this time, his body was already red and swollen, and there was even pus in one place. His throat was so painful that he could barely speak. His forehead was as hot as a soldering iron. This was a plague that was 100 times more serious than before. The owner of the voice didn't even attack him from afar. Jiang Wang immediately sat cross-legged and used the Four Spirits body tempering technique to resist the plague. At the same time, he kept using the poison-swallowing stingers to absorb the raging plague in his body. The poison-swallowing stingers exploded one by one. His body alternated between hot and cold. His spontaneous vitality and the invading plague kept fighting. Only when night fell did he manage to resist the invasion and recover his health. What a terrifying plague! What a terrifying person! The White-Bone Path's Holy Lord? He vaguely guessed in his heart. He naturally remembered Zhang Linchuan's voice. He would never forget Lu Yin and Dong A's roar in the sky above Maplewood City. Miaoyu was needless to say. Among the absolute higher-ups of the White-Bone Path, only the White-Bone Path's Holy Lord's voice had not been heard. And if this bell that created the plague was related to the White-Bone Path's Holy Lord, didn't that mean that the plague in Yang Country was related to the White-Bone Path's Holy Lord's plan? This was an extremely important piece of information. If he could deal with it properly, maybe of course, Jiang Wang was not willing to go back and see what the plague bell had become. A gentleman would not stand under a collapsing wall. He would not take unnecessary risks. Jiang Wang got up from the wilderness and roughly judged the direction. He quickly found the nearest official road and walked along it. The darkness of the night surged back and forth. It was as if some hidden evil beast was secretly drooling, ready to rush out and devour him at any time. He seemed to be unaware and fearless. As they walked, a tall city appeared in their field of vision. There were two big words carved on the city gate, Songfeng. Songfeng meant that the people would have plenty. It was a simple wish. As he approached the city gate, Jiang Wang suddenly remembered that the assassin named Su Xiuxing seemed to be from the assassin organization in this city. That small assassin organization seemed to have a very famous name, World Tower. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.